Chapter 304. Pengu's Bone, Tai Dao Fruit. In an instant, the earthly immortal's fruit of Wei in Luo Fan's lower abdomen suddenly collapsed, turning into magic power units that formed a magic power that quickly circulated inside his body. In his sea of consciousness, the spirit that had been there for tens of thousands of years, like the indomitable spine of Pengu, instantly turned from solid to incorporeal. It changed rapidly and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. And with the disappearance of this spine, the sea of consciousness that had been extremely stable like the real world suddenly underwent endless changes. It was also in this instant that Luo Fan's dark avatar suddenly sensed something. It stood up abruptly, raised its hand, and searched all the miscellaneous things in Luo Fan's sea of consciousness, putting them into its own storage space. Then, with a sudden shake, it instantly left Luo Fan's sea of consciousness and arrived outside Luo Fan's body. After the dark incarnation and all the miscellaneous items left, the world of the sea of consciousness instantly closed up. The void disappeared, and the earth turned into powder. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into chaos. It was hazy like paste. It was completely wrapped up by the strange existence in the outside world, and it was even compressed continuously. In the end, it became as small as a chicken. Along with the emergence of this great change, the magic power within Luo Fan's body also underwent an incomparably huge change. That mysterious, boundless power that had absorbed an inexhaustible amount of power instantly dispersed. In the blink of an eye, it was stirred into a pile. At this moment, it was no longer possible to see any characteristics of the power. It was completely misty. It was compressed into a point by a strange force from the unseen world, just like the world in the sea of consciousness. During this whole process, Luo Fan's mind gradually sank into a mysterious and strange state. It was as if some extremely important and mysterious change was happening, or as if he himself had disappeared. His entire mind and mind gradually merged with some inexplicable existence in the dark. As his mind and will fused with the indescribable existence in the dark, endless information surged toward him like a landslide and tsunami. Those were the supreme profundities of the grand Daos that countless people sought tirelessly in the world. Every bit of information contained the power to turn any weak creature into a supreme being that could move mountains and drain seas. At this moment, Luo Fan was neither happy nor worried. He only knew that he didn't stop. He was trying his best to obtain the supreme profundity contained in some mysterious existence. His mind was like a newborn baby opening his eyes to look at the world for the first time, trying his best to understand the countless wonders that he had tried his best to understand but was unable to understand. His horizons continued to widen, and his cultivation continued to increase at a flying speed. Countless principles that he couldn't understand before suddenly became clear to him at this moment. The entire unfathomable and unfathomable primordial world seemed to have a veil lifted in his eyes. The originally blurry phenomena of heaven and earth became incomparably clear, as if he was looking at the lines on his palm. However, at the same time, there were also countless things and phenomena that he thought were simple and easy to understand. However, they seemed to have become countless times more complicated and profound. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how much he tried to understand, he couldn't understand the profoundness within. Time lost all meaning. At this moment, an inexplicable understanding filled Luo Fan's mind and will. This is Tai. With this understanding, the inside of his body instantly seemed to have been split open, and countless incomparably huge changes took place. From the outside, it looked like in an instant, his body suddenly turned from corporeal to incorporeal, gradually disappearing from this incomparably mysterious floating island. At the same time, the dark incarnation beside Luo Fan also had a slightly dazed expression. It looked around, and with a shake of its body, it gradually disappeared into the void, unable to be found anymore. With that understanding, Luo Fan's entire mind and heart had entered an extremely mysterious state of no one and no me. Naturally, he could no longer split a trace of his will to control the Dark Incarnation. Therefore, the Dark Incarnation only had a little bit of fighting and self-protection instinct left at this moment. In this environment, he naturally chose to reside in the void and hide. At this moment, the body of Luo Fan, who had turned into an incorporeal and merged into the void, changed even more inside his body than outside. At this moment, inside Luo Fan's body, the misty magic power that was like the primal chaos seemed to have obtained some kind of key profound meaning. It began to continuously condense and transform. Gradually, mysterious threads condensed in the magic power that was like the primal chaos. And the appearance of these threads seemed to be splitting open the world, directly splitting apart the magic power's chaos. They could distinguish the purity of the magic power. They had recreated the world of magic power. Countless violent reactions followed one after another, and in the blink of an eye, the magic power that seemed like chaos had completely collapsed. Instead, it was replaced by countless threads that were rapidly fluctuating at every moment, constantly twisting and intertwining with each other, constantly intertwining into all sorts of inconceivable combinations of threads. The combination of these threads seemed chaotic and disorderly, but in fact they contained countless mysteries. It was as if the formation, residence, and destruction of all things in the world were included in it, and it was as if all the mysteries of the universe and space-time were constantly evolving, all the mysteries of heaven and earth that Luo Fan had comprehended after coming to the primordial world could be found in it. There were even many mysteries of heaven and earth that Luo Fan had not comprehended, but had only vaguely realized were also in it. These threads changed rapidly, and in a short while, they had condensed into 129,600 abstruse and indescribably wonderful three-dimensional talismans. However, these three-dimensional talismans were no longer in the form of Buzhou Mountain like before. They were 3D talismans that were constantly changing into billions of different forms at every moment. Everything that Luo Fan could think of could be found in them. The form of Buzhou Mountain, the form of the sun, the form of the moon, the form of the stars, the form of the astral wind, the form of thunder, and the form of billions of innate gods, and even the formless, intangible, and indescribable form of the Tao of spacetime. After the 129,600 three-dimensional talismans were formed, they split in an instant. 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, 3 begets 10,000. In the blink of an eye, the original 129,600 had turned into 1,296,000,000. Moreover, each of the three-dimensional talismans was complete and full. Each of them was exactly the same as the 129,600 three-dimensional talismans that had been formed at the beginning, and even the energy inside them was not inferior. Just as the Dharma power in Luo Fan's body underwent such a change, in the mud pill palace between his eyebrows, the mysterious place where the sea of consciousness was located suddenly separated from the chaos, as if the primordial world had been split apart from the chaos. Among them, there was a skeleton that emitted boundless unyieldingness, and its body contained infinite mysteries. The skeleton stood in the endless clear and turbid space that was separated from the chaos. When the clear and turbid space separated, the tremendous force that was produced acted on the skeleton, but it was like a gentle breeze. It couldn't even shake the skeleton in the slightest. It couldn't even shake the skeleton in the slightest. As the skeleton's mouth opened and closed slightly, there was a soundless roar that went straight to the divine soul of any living creature. Then, the skeleton's legs spread apart, and its two withered hands, which only had bones left, fiercely pushed upwards. Crack in the darkness, there seemed to be such a sound of space being torn apart and heaven and earth being destroyed resounding out of thin air. The skeleton's hands pushed in the direction where the chaos was rising, and in an instant, the speed at which the chaos was rising increased by 1,000 times, and the speed at which the chaos was sinking also increased by 1,000 times. Then, the skeleton straightened its waist and pushed with both hands. Although it was such a simple movement, it had already displayed the incomparably profound and mysterious meaning of martial Tao and divine ability, as if all the Dharma in the world could be contained in it. With this movement, its body continued to grow higher and higher as the heaven and earth became thicker. In the blink of an eye, it had grown from the original height of 100,000 feet to 10,000 miles, 20,000 miles. At last, when the heaven and earth grew to 100,000 miles high and the earth grew to 100,000 miles thick, the skeleton's body grew to 100,000 miles tall as well. His indomitable aura made him seem like the strongest existence in the world, as if even the world could not support him. The natural powers surged crazily. Outside this world, the misty gray world disappeared and was expanded. Gradually, the height of this 100,000 miles tall area stabilized, while the area of this world grew larger and larger. The speed at which it grew was extremely fast. Almost in an instant, it had grown from the original 100,000 miles to more than 10 million miles, and in another instant, it had grown to 100 million miles. That skeleton was generated from Luo Fan's soul. At the moment, this skeleton seemed to be a solid object, but in fact, it was a three-dimensional spell symbol, which was formed by countless tiny, hair-like threads. In essence, it was exactly the same as the spine of Ji Hao's soul, which had transformed into Buzhou Mountain. This was Pangu's bone. It was an existence that grew from Pangu's spine. Its stability was the best in the primordial world. Even Luo Fan himself could not shake the structure of the skeleton at all. Such a magical change almost formed two completely different extremes from the change of his power. It contained the supreme power of Yin and Yang evolved from the two extremes of the universe, mysterious and wonderful. When the world of Ji Hao's sea of consciousness grew to 100 million miles in radius, the pressure in this world was strong enough to crush the strongest thing in the world into powder. At this moment, the support of Pangu's bone finally reached its limit. The surging earth, water, fire, and wind finally reached a stable equilibrium. The misty gray matter could no longer retreat. It kept evolving into the natural powers, and was filled by the misty gray matter outside. During this process, the countless elements of earth, water, fire, and wind poured into the void of the world, constantly filling it. As the natural powers surged into this world, the world gradually changed. The empty world was gradually filled with all kinds of mysterious natural powers. Under the impact of these natural powers, the earth down below changed into countless terrains. Mountains, lakes, plains, deserts, oceans, rivers, lakes, almost all the terrains that could be found in the primordial world could appear in this world. As the various energies grew denser, a mysterious and inexplicable change gradually took place in the world. Endless vitality gathered and transformed in the world, gradually giving birth to countless flowers, plants, trees, insects, fishes, birds, and beasts. In this strange state, time seemed to have no meaning at all, and no one knew how much time had passed. No one knew how long it had been. It seemed to be just a blink of an eye, but also thousands of years. The world had stopped changing. The natural powers grew thicker and thicker. Both the sky and the earth had completely changed. In the sky, all kinds of flying beasts and birds were flying freely. On the ground, all kinds of creatures that Luo Fan had seen, imagined, and created were living happily, except for the Pangu bone, which stood in the middle of the world. The entire world was just like a natural world. As if he woke up from a deep dream, Luo Fan suddenly sensed his own body again. At this very moment, Ji Hao changed his perspective. His spiritual power merged with the Pangu bone, and he looked down at this spiritual world from a magical angle. At this very moment, the great, unyielding power released from this Pangu bone filled every inch of Ji Hao's spiritual space, then surged into his spiritual space through a mysterious angle. Once the power rushed into his spiritual space, It broke the limitation of his spiritual space and swept across his entire body. As this power swept across, the number of magic power units, which had already grown to over 296 billion, suddenly changed in a mysterious way. This change was like a mentally retarded person suddenly growing a super smart person. This kind of change is a kind of change from the root to the essence. After these changes, the magic power units will be the magic power units of Luo Fan Zhe and Yu. Just now, they were Luo Fan's real possessions. That sense of power was immeasurably great, but to turn these magic power units into Ji Hao's own would consume too much power, and it would consume too much spirit power. By the time the 96 million units of magical power had been completely transformed and taken into his own, the aura that had seeped out of the sea of consciousness world finally lost its ability to continue. It shrunk slightly and retracted back into the sea of consciousness world. After this sense of power shrank, except for the 12,960,000 magic power units, all the other 3D spell symbols collapsed instantly and gradually dissipated in the air. Luo Fan sensed the dissipation of these three-dimensional talismans and let out a long sigh. He knew that this was because his own cultivation realm was not high enough. He could not completely control all of these three-dimensional talismans, and could not completely transform them into his own magical power unit. With a thought, the 12,960,000 units of magical power began to circulate in his meridians, revolving around the circulation route of the nameless cultivation technique. At the same time, the mantra of the nameless divine art flowed through his mind and consciousness. In the blink of an eye, the Dharma power had already circulated 1,296 times in his meridians. In the end, it shrank and condensed into an indescribable fruit in his lower abdomen dantian. This fruit was extremely large, powerful, pure, and pure. It seemed to be one with the universe and coexisted with all living beings. It seemed to contain the endless world, but it also seemed to be unable to go deeper. It was the ultimate truth that there was no outside, and there was no inside. In the dantian, the fruit was like a universe, a world, and a person. It trembled as if it contained all the profundities in the world. This was the Tai Dao fruit. It was a Tai Dao fruit that had the same lineage as the Earth Immortal Dao fruit, but it had undergone a qualitative transformation compared to the Earth Immortal Dao fruit. It had improved by countless times and changed by countless times. After the Tai Dao fruit was formed, Luo Fan instantly felt that he had a mysterious and wonderful connection with the primordial world. This wonderful connection seemed to be able to allow him to do things that he had to put in a lot of effort in the past without expending any energy. At this moment, the Tai Dao fruit in his lower abdomen trembled slightly, and an extremely mysterious power was suddenly emitted from the Tai Dao fruit. This power was extremely mysterious, but it was also earth-shattering. Under this power, Luo Fan instantly felt that his connate Dao body, which had been tempered by the chaotic essence Qi for countless years, had instantly collapsed and reformed. It collapsed and reformed again. After 9 consecutive times, his connate Dao body had grown to be more than 1,000 times stronger than before. If Luo Fan's body was said to be as strong as a diamond in the past, then his current body was 1,000 times stronger than a diamond. It had reached a level where even a power that could shatter a diamond 10,000 times would not be able to harm him. As his body changed, Luo Fan's figure gradually turned from illusory to real, and slowly appeared on the floating island. When he appeared here again, a feeling of omnipotence appeared in Luo Fan's mind. This feeling was the same as the feeling he had when he was in the spirit space. However, there was a limit to the range of this feeling. It was not like in the spirit space, where he could control the entire world. Instead, it could only cover a radius of 10,000 kilometers. With a thought, the void in front of Luo Fan distorted slightly. After the distortion, a stone suddenly appeared in front of Luo Fan in the void somewhere behind Luo Fan. This was the result of Luo Fan using his omnipotent senses to distort the space of the primordial world and move the stone directly in front of him. I see. I see. I see. The space of the primordial world is actually like this. Luo Fan murmured, and his eyes revealed a deep light that seemed to have seen through everything. Chapter 305. Words follow law. 10,000 bones rebirth. The space of the primordial world was different from the space of the minor kiliacosm and the medium kiliacosm. The space of the minor kiliacosm and the medium kiliacosm was also a complete space that could produce all kinds of primordial chi. The minor kiliacosm was even able to produce primordial chi that was close to chaotic primordial chi after being activated by Luo Fan's supreme power. However, compared to the space of the primordial world, these two spaces were like glass and diamond. The two looked very similar. They were both crystal clear, but there was a world of difference in essence. Their values were also like clouds and mud. The space of the primordial world was not only extremely stable, it could even withstand the strongest attack of a golden immortal without any changes. Moreover, it contained endless mysteries of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was completely different from the simple space of the minor kiliacosm and the medium kiliacosm. In the eyes of Luo Fan, who had already attained the primordial unity Tao fruit, the space of the primordial world was filled with endless threads and mysterious trajectories. Among them, every thread and every mysterious trajectory contained some kind of mysterious and unfathomable principle. It contained the profound meaning that could allow living beings to transcend the cycle of life and death after comprehending it. In fact, if one did not have a certain level of comprehension of these threads and these mysterious trajectories, even if one's power surpassed the golden immortal realm, even if one's power had reached the level of attaining the primordial unity Tao fruit, one would definitely not be able to distort this kind of space and affect the space of the primordial world. At this moment, Luo Fan had already attained the primordial unity Tao fruit. To him, although he did not have a specific comprehension, the mysteries of the world that he had comprehended over the past tens of thousands of years had unknowingly coincided with the profound meaning of the great Tao contained in the spatial threads and trajectories. It was precisely because of this that he could easily distort the primordial world within a certain range, and it was also why he could be almost omnipotent within a radius of 10,000 kilometers. It could be said that with the power to distort space, Luo Fan's power had already reached an unimaginable level. Now, even if he was besieged by tens of thousands of golden immortals, even if each of them had the power of Luo Fan before he attained the primordial unity Tao fruit, he could still easily escape and defeat them one by one. In the end, he could wipe out these tens of thousands of golden immortals. It could be said that after he attained the grand Tao fruit, Luo Fan's ability had attained a state of invincibility amongst those at the same cultivation realm as him. With a slight thought, Luo Fan raised his hand and gently waved it in the void. His dark incarnation was pulled out of the void by a mysterious force, and in the blink of an eye, it had already appeared in front of Luo Fan from its hiding place. During this entire process, Luo Fan didn't attach his consciousness to the dark incarnation to make it do anything. He merely relied on his absolute control of the space within 10,000 kilometers to locate the dark incarnation, and then he used the power of space to pull it out. The dark incarnation was Luo Fan. After being pulled out, it didn't panic in the slightest. It smiled faintly and said, "You are me, so why bother? Since I am you, what's the harm in doing so?" Luo Fan said with a faint smile. His words were full of charm and wonderful beyond words. After saying that, with a thought from Luo Fan, the dark incarnation transformed into a beam of black light and darted straight into the mud pill palace between Luo Fan's eyebrows. Through a mysterious and indescribable location, the dark incarnation rushed into the sea of consciousness, which was 100,000 miles high and had a circumference of 100 million miles. Luo Fan then sat down cross-legged at the foot of the towering skeleton, closed his eyes, and went on a mental journey. During the whole process of seeking the Tai Tao fruit, Luo Fan didn't have any concept of time at all. For him, the whole process seemed to have only passed in an instant, yet it also felt like tens of thousands of years. At this moment, everything was done. With a thought in his mind, he knew how much time had passed in the blink of an eye. He didn't need to use any magical powers or magic art. Unexpectedly, another 13,000 years have passed. After understanding this, Luo Fan sighed. Astonishingly, it had been more than 13,000 years since he began to seek the Tai Dao fruit until he finally attained it. In total, more than 23,000 years had passed since he met Daoist Tanmu. In less than 2,000 years, it would be the arrival of the Great Chaotic Tribulation. The passage of time was truly breathtaking. With a thought in his mind, the wind and clouds in the sky began to move. He didn't need to use any magic arts or magic power, but an endless amount of mysterious energy in the air began to gather towards him. In the blink of an eye, an auspicious cloud the size of an acre was formed under his feet. The auspicious cloud was as white as snow. The top was flat, but the surroundings and the bottom were constantly undergoing all kinds of complicated and mysterious changes. The clouds on the surface of the auspicious cloud kept changing, constantly evolving the trajectories of the Supreme Great Tao, forming countless patterns that contained the truths of heaven and earth. As the auspicious cloud was formed, a strange fragrance appeared out of nowhere in the void. There were even wisps of sounds that contained the mysteries of the Great Tao surrounding the auspicious cloud, making it seem even more mysterious and incredible than Daoist Tanmu's Great Wood Tao verification technique. After obtaining the Tai Tao fruit, Luo Fan found that he had reached the state of words come true. With a thought, the supreme Great Tao of the primordial world would sense it, and countless magical effects would descend. At this moment, the auspicious cloud was naturally born from the void of the primordial world. It contained incredible mysteries. Standing on this auspicious cloud, Luo Fan, who was still rejoicing over the fact that he had the power to speak, instantly understood that this auspicious cloud was incomparably compatible with the space of the untainted land. Its flying speed had reached an unimaginable level. This place was 3 trillion miles away from the primordial world. If he used his previous speed, it would probably take him more than 100 years to return to Buzhou Mountain. Even if he used the nebula, it would take him more than a year and an incomparably large amount of chaotic primordial qi. However, it would only take him a month to drive this auspicious cloud to Buzhou Mountain, which was 3 trillion miles away. In just a short month. It could be said that compared to the moment before he obtained the Tai Tao fruit, Luo Fan's speed had increased by more than 1,000 times. When Luo Fan understood this, a trace of joy flashed in his mind. With a thought, the auspicious cloud floated towards the northwest very slowly. However, it only took an instant for it to float more than 100,000 miles away. After a short while, he could no longer see the existence of the floating island. Standing on the auspicious cloud, the surrounding scenery slowly changed. It was impossible to tell that the speed of the auspicious cloud had reached such a level. Luo Fan looked around and raised his hand to wave it gently. A young man appeared in front of him out of thin air. "Greetings, master." After the young man appeared, he bowed. It was the treasure spirit of the heaven-observing mirror, heaven-observing boy, who had been ordered by Luo Fan to monitor the primordial world and report to him if there were any abnormalities. Luo Fan nodded and said, "Get up. In the past 23,000 years, has there been any abnormalities in the primordial world?" When he was seeking the Tai Tao fruit, he could not even spare a bit of energy to control the dark incarnation, let alone the report of heaven-observing boy. "Master, 12,271 years ago, there was an abnormal fluctuation of the space-time door in the east-southeast direction of Buzhou Mountain in the primordial world. It was 1,356,720 miles away from Buzhou Mountain. At that time, heaven-observing boy had reported it, but Master ignored it. 11,362 years ago, in the south-southwest of that location, at a distance of 329,729,729 miles away, another portal appeared. Sky Gazer Boy began to talk incessantly. As he listened, Luo Fan sighed secretly. In the 13,000 years that he had been seeking the Tai Tao fruit, there were a total of 12 signs of the opening of the space-time door. In other words, there were a total of 12 waves of visitors from the outer realm who had visited the primordial world. It sounds like these are not from the free incarnation. They should be visitors from another outer realm. A thought flashed across Luo Fan's mind, and he thought to himself, "That's all. Master, please decide." Heaven-observing boy had already finished his story and bowed to Luo Fan. "Continue to monitor the primordial world. If there's anything, continue to report." Luo Fan nodded and said, "Yes." Heaven-observing boy naturally would not stand on ceremony with Luo Fan. He bowed and his figure gradually turned into nothingness. He merged back into the void of the primordial world and returned to his original body. In the past, although Luo Fan had refined the heaven-observing mirror himself, Luo Fan did not fully understand the profoundness of it. Even though he had seen the process many times, he could not grasp the profoundness. However, at that moment, his eyes could see through space and he saw the entire mysterious process of heaven-observing boy merging into the void. Suddenly, Luo Fan seemed to have understood something. He seemed to have understood some of the origin of space of the primordial world. With a slight activation, the speed of the magic cloud under his feet increased a little. Since he already knew the arrival of the 12 spacetime portals, Luo Fan naturally would not continue with his previous plan. With a thought, the magic cloud changed its direction slightly and headed towards the closest location among the 12 spacetime portals. The heaven-observing mirror was a magic treasure that Luo Fan had refined. With a thought, Luo Fan could obtain its memory at will and find the specific location of the 12 spacetime portals. Naturally, he did not have to worry about not being able to find the location. Half a month passed. Luo Fan crossed a distance of 1.2 trillion miles and approached the location of the 8 spacetime portals that had appeared. As soon as he got close to that location, Luo Fan frowned. Although he was still thousands of miles away from the spacetime portal, he could already sense the monstrous devil chi that was emitted from that location. Looking up, through the refraction of space, there was a huge black cloud that was thousands of miles away. The location of the spacetime portal soared into the sky and became thinner and thinner, covering an area with a radius of thousands of miles. At the location where Luo Fan was, the black cloud was so thin that it was almost non-existent. With a thought, the magic cloud under his feet gradually dissipated. Then, his figure turned into a long rainbow and shot towards the location of the spacetime portal. Soon, he crossed a distance of thousands of miles and arrived at the location of the spacetime portal. His figure condensed again from the state of the long rainbow. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan saw the thing in the center of that location. A huge white bone gate stood between heaven and earth. This white bone gate was thousands of feet tall and more than 3,000 feet wide. The ground within a radius of thousands of miles around it had undergone some kind of very delicate transformation. The ground was covered with flat, transparent crystals, and within these transparent crystals were skeletons. These skeletons came in all shapes and sizes. Some had 9 heads and 3 bodies, some had 8 heads and 10 tails, and some even had all kinds of strange beasts that Luo Fan had seen, thought of, or even never seen or thought of. There were all kinds of skeletons, just like the skeletons of all the living beings in the universe. Luo Fan raised his eyes and looked over. His eyes directly saw through these crystals, and he frowned. These crystals were not ordinary crystals. They were not even things that originally belonged to the untainted world. They were all foreign objects. Obviously, they had been transported from the world behind the white bone gate. They contained extremely rich and strange primordial chi. These primordial chi contained endless brutality and an infinite aura of death. There was also a very strange power of breeding, as if it could give birth to some kind of powerful existence. He raised his hand and grabbed, and a crystal stone was dug out from the ground. In an instant, it crossed a distance of tens of kilometers and arrived in front of Luo Fan. The white bones wrapped in this crystal stone were the skeletons of a Tyrannosaurus rex. They were extremely ferocious. Who dares to behave atrociously in my sacred land? Put down the heavenly bone holy stone. Just then, a loud shout in an extremely strange language entered Luo Fan's ears. At this time, Luo Fan's ability had already reached an inconceivable level. Although he had never heard of this language before, and it was even more complicated, the moment it entered his ears, it was immediately converted into a mind instructs, in a second, and was understood by him. So it's actually a living creature. Luo Fan instantly discovered the source of the voice. This voice came from the bone in the crystal stone in his hand. Come out. He frowned, raised his hand, and exerted a little force. The crystal stone, which was several times harder than a diamond, instantly turned into powder. However, the seemingly fragile bones were not damaged at all. Who are you? The heavenly bone holy stone has absorbed the immortal world Yuan Qi for such a long time and is already indestructible. How can you break it? The skeleton turned pale with fright. Luo Fan couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on this unknown life form. With a thought, he directly invaded the core of the bone and brought everything about the bone into his mind. This skeleton was obviously a life form. Although it seemed a little strange to use bones as a body, it was nothing compared to the countless innate gods in the great wasteland. After grasping everything about the skeleton life form, Luo Fan finally understood the specifics of the world where the skeleton life form came from, and also knew the purpose of these lives coming to the great wasteland. It was actually just a coincidence that I opened the door. After understanding the reason, Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly. The core of the skeleton life form was a soul that seemed to exist and not exist. It was hidden somewhere in the skeleton, and as long as the core was not destroyed, the skeleton life form would not die. The world of the skeleton life form was one of the countless outer realms that were affected by the energy waves produced by the creation of the Great Wasteland. Its name was the Heaven of Rebirth of 10,000 Bones. The Heaven of Rebirth of 10,000 Bones gathered all the corpses of the outer realms. Every time a life form with a skeleton died in the Heaven of Rebirth of 10,000 Bones, a skeleton would be born in the Heaven of Rebirth of 10,000 Bones, and a skeleton life form would be born. As soon as these skeletons were born, they were infected by the extremely violent Yuan Qi of the Heaven of Rebirth of 10,000 Bones. They knew how to continuously kill their companions and absorb the cores of their own kind to grow. The entire Heaven of Rebirth of 10,000 Bones was extremely vast. Although it could not compare to the Great Wasteland, it was more than 10,000 times larger than the minor kiliacosm that Luo Fan had created. There were billions of living beings in it, which simply exceeded the limit of what could be described with numbers. Moreover, the speed at which time passed was billions of times faster than the Great Wasteland. It had been billions of yuanwees since it was created by the Great Wasteland. Countless powerhouses had evolved during this time. However, due to the nature of the Yuan Qi and the level of the Heaven of Rebirth of 10,000 Bones, the strongest living beings could only reach the peak of the itinerant immortal realm. They could not break through the itinerant immortal realm and enter the perfected immortal realm. The appearance of the bone door beneath Luo Fan's feet was actually a coincidence. As for what kind of coincidence it was, the skeleton life form had no way of knowing because of its low status. Naturally, Luo Fan did not know the secret. It's rare for you to be able to eliminate the violent aura engraved in the origin of your life. Luo Fan sighed and waved his hand. The holy heavenly bones stone that had turned into powder condensed again, wrapping around the skeleton life form once more. Because the skeleton life form had grown up in the heaven of rebirth of 10,000 bones, it was born with a violent aura in its origin of life. However, after being wrapped by the holy heavenly bone stone, it had absorbed the Kanate Yuan Qi in the great wasteland for nearly 10,000 years. It had already used the boundless power of the Kanate Yuan Qi to expel the violent aura. That was why the skeleton life form had shouted at Luo Fan. If it were not for the fact that the violent aura had been expelled, it would have attacked Luo Fan immediately. You're an immortal from the immortal world. There really are immortals in the immortal world. At this moment, the skeletal creature's two empty eye sockets seemed to be emitting an inconceivable light. Shut up. How can the great wasteland be a place where everyone can come? If it weren't for the fact that you've eliminated the weakness of your origin, I would have destroyed you long ago. Luo Fan shouted indifferently. Chapter 306. The Consciousness of the World, the Spirit of All Living Things. Luo Fan's thoughts turned slightly, and his figure fell down in an instant. In the blink of an eye, he had already crossed through space and stood before the tall bone door. The bone door was simple and unadorned. Although it was made of white bones, it gave off a distant and desolate aura. There was not a single trace of cruelty or terror, making it seem extremely strange and mysterious. Luo Fan's figure was like an ant compared to the white bone gate. However, his aura was as lofty as a mountain. Even if the white bone gate was 1,000 times bigger, it still wouldn't be able to suppress him. If there were any outsiders here, the first thing they would see would definitely be Luo Fan, who was extremely tiny compared to the bone door, and not the bone door. The primordial unity Dao fruit was an extremely profound fruit. After Luo Fan attained the grand Dao fruit, his cultivation was already capable of commanding the heavens and the earth, and everything in the world had to rise and fall. So how could this tiny artificial door compare to it? The bone door gave off a rather mysterious demonic aura. To the world outside, Luo Fan was also a demon, and the chaotic energy could also be called chaotic demonic qi. Of course, it was only possible. Due to the special nature of the primordial world, the living beings outside usually called the primordial world the immortal world, and the powerful cultivators in the primordial world were called immortals. This demonic qi was extremely mysterious, and its power was not weak either. However, due to the mysteries of the primordial world's space, it was constantly disintegrating and neutralizing, becoming invisible to the naked eye. However, behind the bone door, the demonic qi was pitch black like ink. It surged like a great river and waves, completely covering the entire door. Luo Fan could not see through the demonic qi and see the true appearance of the world behind the bone door without focusing his eyes. After stepping onto the heavenly bone holy rock, Luo Fan sensed it slightly and knew that the heavenly bone holy rock was rather tough. He exerted a little force and knew that it would not deform even if 10,000 tons of force were to be applied to it. At this moment, the heavenly bone holy rock beneath Luo Fan's feet contained countless skeletal lifeforms. At this moment, these skeletal lifeforms seemed to be immersed in a mysterious state. They seemed to be feeling strange because of the endless Kanate qi of the primordial world. They seemed to be enjoying the change in their nature. Naturally, he wouldn't be able to sense Luo Fan's arrival, so he naturally wouldn't be able to sense it. Luo Fan came here directly after attaining the Tai Dao fruit, but he did not have time to cultivate the Pangu chaotic heavenly pupils. At this time, his eyes were still the golden eyes of the sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon, but it was enough. With a thought, golden and silver light shone from his eyes, enveloping the entire ground made of heavenly bone holy stone. As the golden and silver light enveloped him, countless pieces of information flashed through his mind. In the blink of an eye, he had seen through the cores of every single skeletal life wrapped within the heavenly bone holy stone. He had also seen through the past and even the future of every single skeletal life. After seeing the future of these countless skeletal life forms, Luo Fan sighed. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and waved it gently. With this wave, an invisible potential appeared out of nowhere and directly acted on the countless heavenly bone holy stone. It quickly seeped in and instantly brushed past every single skeletal life form. The future was bright. In the future, it was possible for them to change their nature under the influence of the endless Kane Chi. They could turn violence into peace and madness into calmness. The skeletal life forms would obtain endless benefit. The violence and madness at their core would dissipate greatly, and the speed at which they changed their nature would increase by dozens or even hundreds of times. On the contrary, the skeletal life forms that had no bright future and could not change their nature, no matter how long they endured the Kane Chi in the heavenly bone holy stone, welcomed a disaster. In an instant, their cores were destroyed and shattered by the invisible potential that appeared out of nowhere. Even their bodies turned into ordinary, lifeless skeletal specimens. After a quick count, Luo Fan sighed even more. Among the countless skeletal life forms, there were only 1,296 who had a bright future and had the chance to change their nature. The remaining 999 out of 1,000 had a bleak future. No matter how long they spent, they would not succeed. Luo Fan had already attained the grand unity Dao fruit. At this moment, he had absolute confidence that he was the strongest person with the highest cultivation in the primordial world. With this understanding, he unknowingly felt a special sense of mission. Unknowingly, he treated the primordial world as his own. If the skeletal life forms could change their nature and eliminate their natural brutality and madness, he would not be stingy with letting them live in the primordial world and add a strange race to the primordial world. However, no matter what, the skeletal life forms were tyrannical and crazy. Even if they broke through the heavenly bone holy stone in the future, they would only continue to destroy and bring about endless destruction. That would be a taboo for him, so he naturally would not let them exist. The moment the countless skeletal life cores were destroyed, an extremely powerful will surged out from the bone door. Who dares to attack the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven warrior? A sound that seemed to be formed by countless overlapping sounds came from the white bone gate and surged into Luo Fan's ears like the billowing waves of the sea. The moment the will surged out, an even larger amount of demonic energy that could not be seen with the naked eye suddenly spewed out from the bone door. Like a dam bursting, it arrived beside Luo Fan in an instant and wrapped around him. The tyrannical, deathly aura, and the faintly discernible power of nurturing in the surrounding 10,000 kilometers instantly increased by 100 times. The increase in quantity caused a change in quality and a drastic change in the environment. In the blink of an eye, the area was filled with chilly winds. Demonic energy soared into the sky, and sand and stones flew everywhere. This caused the entire world to seem to have fallen into hell. With a single thought from Luo Fan, the void changed on its own. Endless immortal light, the sound of the great Tao, and heavenly flowers appeared out of nowhere. The surging black aura, tyrannical aura, deathly aura, and power of nurturing were instantly engulfed by the boundless innate vitality. They were assimilated and disappeared without a trace. Luo Fan said indifferently, "It seems that you were the one who was able to open this space-time door. Why are you hiding? Do you want me to capture you?" That thought that appeared out of thin air was very mysterious and strange. It did not seem to be the will of an individual, nor was it the will of a living creature. Instead, it was a will that stood above all living beings and looked down on all things in the world from an infinitely higher position. As for what it was exactly, even Luo Fan, who had already attained primordial unity fruit of Wei, could not immediately see through it. "So you're a great practitioner of the immortal world. No wonder you dare to treat the warriors of this world like this. The extremely strange voice continued. The anger in the voice seemed to have disappeared, and it was now rather calm. However, the person who spoke did not appear. Luo Fan frowned. He could not be bothered to say more. Now that he had the ability to speak with the law, even the laws of the primordial world would automatically change after he spoke, producing changes that matched his words and thoughts. Moreover, he wanted this person to appear. Since he had already said this, he would not fail. With a thought, he raised his hand and grabbed the air. The space of the primordial world changed on its own. In the blink of an eye, a mysterious and indescribable power entered the white bone door from the space. After searching for a bit, it was withdrawn. However, when it was retracted, it was already mysterious. It was faintly discernible, seemingly boundless, seemingly insignificant, and seemingly insignificant invisible existence. The golden and silver light in Luo Fan's eyes flickered and shone on the invisible existence. In an instant, a very strange change appeared. A very obscure but very powerful force that seemed to contain endless mysteries of the great Tao, and all the changes in the world acted on the golden and silver light. Under the effect of this force, the golden and silver light seemed to have been gently pushed away by a force. It was pushed away from its original trajectory and actually slanted. It could not completely lock the invisible existence in place, let alone see through the essence of this invisible existence. It's actually the consciousness of the world, the spirit of all living things. Although the light emitted by his eyes was pushed away, Luo Fan's cultivation realm had already reached an indescribable level. At that moment, he still saw some clues about the existence. He was shocked and could not help but exclaim, "Is this the immortal world? The essence energy is so high level, the world is so vast, and the space is so stable. It is indeed worthy of being the place that all living beings in the billions of worlds dream of." The mysterious existence did not panic at all when it was captured. Instead, it sighed as if it was relaxed and happy. Luo Fan frowned slightly. With a thought, the space of the primordial world changed on its own. In an instant, it was like a piece of cloth twisting. From all directions, it wrapped the mysterious and inexplicable thing that was suspected to be the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things in a small void. In an instant, it was separated from the primordial world. No, it was not easy for me to escape from that narrow world and come to the immortal world. Don't imprison me again. At that moment, the mysterious existence panicked, as if it was rather afraid. Luo Fan naturally did not care about how the existence would react. After using the infinite power of the space of the primordial world to imprison this thing, the golden and silver light in his eyes flickered rapidly. The golden and silver light in his eyes were like searchlights, enveloping the unknown existence that was imprisoned in the small void. It was unknown if the unknown existence was the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things, but it was a fact that it contained infinite power of the rules. At that moment, an obscure power was emitted from its body, trying its best to reject the light emitted by Luo Fan's eyes and resist Luo Fan's probe. Unfortunately, Luo Fan had already tried this force a long time ago, so he naturally wouldn't make the same mistake at this time. With a single thought, the two rays of light turned, twisted, and bypassed two mysterious and unfathomable trajectories, instantly disintegrating the obscure and enormous force, and directly illuminated the indescribable existence. In an instant, the power of his eyes was fully unleashed. In the blink of an eye, he saw through the essence of the object. I see. So it really is the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things. I didn't expect the connection between the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven and the billions of worlds in the universe to give birth to such a mysterious change. The mysteries of nature are indeed mysterious and unbelievable. Luo Fan sighed. The complexity of this object was even greater than the space of the primordial world. However, the structure of the object was not like the space of the primordial world, which contained the threads and trajectories of the Supreme Great Tao. Instead, it was the indescribably mysterious and wonderful will of living beings. The will of these living beings was the deepest, most persistent, and most unbreakable will of all the living beings born and dead in the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven over the billions of years. These various wills had been condensed and transformed over countless years. Under the nurturing of the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven and earth, they gradually condensed into one, giving birth to the mysterious consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things. The 10,000 bones rebirth heaven was connected to the billions of worlds in the universe. The living beings in it were formed from the skeletons of dead living beings in the billions of worlds in the universe. These living beings were born with the imprints of the billions of worlds in the universe. Their most persistent, deepest, and most unbreakable will naturally included the imprints of the billions of worlds in the universe. When they were gathered together, the changes produced were unimaginably complicated. Even with Luo Fan's current cultivation level of primordial unity Tao fruit, he could not truly see through it, let alone replicate it. A thought flashed through his mind. At that moment, the memories of the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things flashed through his mind like a movie. After a while, he completely understood all of the item's memories. He also understood why the spatial door had appeared and why countless heavenly bone holy stones were displayed here. The consciousness of heaven and earth, the spirit of all living things, was born naturally from the myriad bones rebirth heaven. It contained the imprints of billions of worlds and fused with the myriad bones rebirth heaven. It represented the deepest, most persistent, and most unbreakable will of all living things in the world. However, its power was only equivalent to peak perfected immortals. His cultivation realm was even weaker than his strength. He had just stepped into the true celestial realm. Such power was like an ant to Luo Fan, who had already attained primordial unity Tao fruit. The 10,000 bones rebirth heaven had already gathered an extremely powerful force over the billions of years. There were over 100 million beings that were equivalent to itinerant immortals who had attained Tao. There were hundreds of billions of beings that were equivalent to tribulation overcoming. The muddle-headed beings below them were incalculable, like the sand in the Ganges River. If such a powerful force was gathered, it would probably be much more powerful than even his embodiment. Unfortunately, this force could not be used by Luo Fan. This was because even the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things could not control that power. Only an extremely small number of beings possessed complete consciousness among the 100 million itinerant immortals. They could maintain a sliver of themselves amidst the endless brutality and madness. Most of the others, or even almost all of them, had lost their sense of self after absorbing too much of the brutal aura of death. They had become the embodiment of brutality and madness. They could not even control themselves, let alone be controlled by others. Although the beings at tribulation overcoming were in a better situation because they had absorbed less of the brutal aura of death, and the proportion of beings that could maintain their sense of self was slightly higher, it was still extremely rare. Moreover, the power of the tribulation overcoming was not very useful in a battle, so Luo Fan did not take it seriously. It's a pity. It's a pity that I can't take such a powerful force for myself. It's really regrettable. Such a regretful thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. Let go of me. Let go of me. The consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things were formed from the consciousness of all the beings in the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven over countless years. It was born to be the most brutal and crazy existence. It could only maintain its sense of self because of the supreme principle that things would move in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme. At this moment, due to the sudden rise and fall, it could not control itself for a moment. The madness and brutality instantly covered its consciousness, and it began to crazily collide in the space that was enveloped by Luo Fan. Luo Fan frowned and thought for a moment. The void of the primordial world changed on its own. A mysterious power appeared out of thin air, and a strange fragrance appeared out of thin air. Wisps of voice that did not seem to exist but seemed to be directly engraved into the souls of living beings appeared out of thin air. Then, the tyranny and madness that had invaded the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things slowly calmed down. It returned to its original balance and stability. It was even more balanced and stable than before. This also made the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things more obvious. Thank you for saving my life, great immortal. Please take me as your disciple. The consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things made the most decisive decision at this moment in the billions of years since it was born. It was sealed and imprisoned by Luo Fan in the small space, and bowed to Luo Fan. Although this thing did not have a physical body, it was only a formless object that seemed to exist and not exist. However, its mysteriousness made it so that any living being could know its thoughts and see its movements. Luo Fan was slightly stunned. He had never considered the possibility of taking the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things as his disciple. At this moment, when he was mentioned by this thing, he had a thought and came to a sudden realization. This method was very appropriate. Not only could it allow him to have an extremely talented disciple, but it could also allow him to use the mysteries of the 10,000 bones rebirth to connect to the billions of worlds in the universe. In the future, he could even use it to walk through the billions of worlds in the universe. Thinking of this, he laughed and said, "All right. I originally had no intention of taking you in, but since your heart to seek the Tao is so sincere, I will take you in. You will be my 5th disciple." "Thank you for taking me in, Master. I don't have a name. Please give me a name, Master." The consciousness of the world revealed a sense of joy and said, "You are the 10,000 bones reincarnation heaven's will of heaven and earth. You are also the spirit of all living things. I will give you a name, Gu Ling. How about it? Gu Ling. Gu Ling. Thank you, Master, for giving me a name." The consciousness of the world was inexplicably happy. Chapter 307. The spirit body proves the great Tao, and the white bone door suppresses the void. Gu Ling could naturally and easily transform into all living things in the heaven of myriad bones rebirth. He could naturally use the bodies of the billions of living beings in the heaven of myriad bones rebirth to exist in the world. However, after he came to the untainted world, he was only a rather strange, spiritual consciousness. At most, it could be considered to contain some great Tao laws of another world. Although it was rare and mysterious compared to the spiritual consciousness of ordinary innate gods, it was not much better and did not have much power. In this way, how could he do the same thing in the untainted world as he did in the heaven of myriad bones rebirth? However, cultivation clearly required a body. Even if it was not a physical body, he still needed to find a vessel for his spiritual consciousness. Luo Fan looked at the illusory Gu Ling, who seemed to be real and illusory at the same time. Light flashed through his mind. Then, he thought of something. In an instant, boundless innate origin energy rapidly gathered from the void from all directions. Then, in an incomparably profound and complicated way, it constantly twisted, entangled, glued, and assembled in front of Luo Fan. In the blink of an eye, a blurry, faintly discernible, illusory human figure had already condensed in front of Luo Fan. That human-shaped illusory figure did not have any face, and its figure was constantly changing. That appearance seemed to be in the process of being formed, as though it was choosing its figure and appearance. You do not have a body now, so you are not beautiful. It is not good for your cultivation. First, enter the spirit body that I have constructed for you. In the future, I will find a physical body for you to attach to, Luo Fan said indifferently. Gu Ling was overjoyed when he heard that. He said, "Thank you, Master, for bestowing me a spirit." As he spoke, the spiritual consciousness trembled slightly. The consciousness of the world rushed forward and directly entered the spirit body that Luo Fan had created. As it entered, the spirit body rapidly distorted and changed rapidly. In the blink of an eye, its body had stabilized to the same height as Luo Fan, and its appearance had become that of a young man who bore a slight resemblance to Luo Fan. Its entire body looked translucent and illusory, as if it was condensed from gas. However, it no longer seemed illusory. It seemed to have become a solid creation. As the change stabilized, countless heavenly flowers suddenly fell from the sky, and a strange fragrance suddenly appeared out of nowhere, spreading in the air within a radius of 10,000 miles. In the darkness, only Luo Fan felt that some kind of supreme existence had suddenly undergone some strange changes. There seemed to be some kind of connection with this somewhat illusory body that seemed to be condensed from gas in front of him. Luo Fan looked over and found that the great sun golden eyes and the bright moon silver eyes could clearly see the inside and outside of this Gu Ling's body, including the deepest imprints at the core of his spiritual sense. With a single thought, he could even see through his past experiences and some scenes in the future. This was impressively the supreme great Tao that had accepted the ancient spirit as a part of the heavenly Tao that was under its control after obtaining this mysterious soul-spirit body. Gu Ling naturally did not feel this way. When he appeared, he smelled the strange fragrance and saw the heavenly flowers. He only thought that this was a natural change and was slightly stunned. Then, he carefully felt the feeling of having a body for the first time. After a while, he kowtowed to Luo Fan and said, "Thank you, Master, for giving me a soul. Only now do I feel like I'm a real living being." At this moment, this Gu Ling's voice no longer felt like a combination of billions of voices. Instead, it was like a real innate or acquired living being. It was a thought and a voice. Although this spirit body seemed to be condensed by Luo Fan by casually gathering the innate vitality, in fact, this spirit body contained the supreme power of Luo Fan's Tai Dao fruit. Although its essence was not as good as the innate divine soul of the innate gods, it was only a little bit weaker. It was countless times stronger than the spirit body of any acquired living being. If Luo Fan hadn't attained the primordial unity Dao fruit and gained the ability to conjure the law of speech, it would have taken him thousands of years to refine such a marvelous soul body. Moreover, the soul body he refined might not even be comparable to this soul body. Now that you have a spirit body, you are naturally a real living being. I will teach you another method. Practice hard. In the future, even if you can't find a suitable body, you can use your divine power to make one. At this time, the heavenly flowers had disappeared, and Luo Fan said to Gu Ling calmly. As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved it in the void. The space of the untainted world changed naturally. Instantly, hundreds of thousands of words and thousands of patterns, which seemed to be engraved in the void and seemed to have grown in this space since ancient times, appeared. It was a mysterious, wonderful, and complicated incantation recorded in Pangu characters, soul-proving Dao technique. This incantation was very mysterious. It was created by Luo Fan by combining the great wood-proving Dao technique and the mystery of his own Dao fruit. It was a supreme method that could not only strengthen the real spirit but also the divine soul. If Gu Ling cultivated this incantation in the future, if he found a physical body in the future, the result of the cultivation of his divine soul could be transferred to his physical body without any loss. If he did not find a physical body in the future, he could also cultivate this incantation with his soul and finally achieve the supreme Dao fruit. However, after all, without a physical body, it would be slightly more difficult to achieve the Dao than having a physical body. This mysterious incantation was recorded in Pangu characters. Although Gu Ling was the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things, he did not recognize such a mysterious and complicated Pangu characters. Fortunately, Luo Fan had already thought of this. After condensing the incantation into its own form, with a slight thought, the space of the untainted world naturally changed mysteriously. In the blink of an eye, these words that seemed to be engraved in the void emitted extremely strong thoughts. These thoughts were extremely mysterious. They directly explained the information contained in the words clearly. Although Gu Ling did not recognize Pangu characters, the moment he saw the words, he realized that the thoughts of these words directly surged into the depths of his soul and were directly understood by him. When he finished reading this incantation, it would also be time for him to learn Pangu characters. After reading this incantation, Gu Ling's face revealed a look of shock. Gu Ling's predecessor was the will of the world, the spirit of all living things. He also used the mysterious characteristic of the 10,000 bones rebirth to have an extremely mysterious and close connection with the billions of worlds outside the untainted world. This mysterious and close connection allowed Gu Ling to see countless scenes in the billions of worlds. Although he could not say that he understood the mysteries of the billions of worlds, his knowledge was still quite shocking. However, when he saw the incantation that Luo Fan had casually engraved in the void, he understood that his knowledge was shallow. He felt that although he was almost omnipotent in the 10,000 bones rebirth, he was just a frog at the bottom of a well. In this incantation, he had comprehended a trace of the supreme profundity of the great Tao. It was already so profound that it exceeded his understanding. In an instant, he knew that using all means to come to the celestial world and become his master's disciple was definitely the wisest decision he had made in his life. It's a pity that although you are the will of heaven and earth, the spirit of all living things, this is not the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven. What you can only bring is your innate aptitude. You can't bring your cultivation level and cultivation level. It's really a pity. Luo Fan carefully checked Gu Ling's cultivation level and said with pity, "This is the celestial world. I will obtain more room for improvement here. In addition to the mysterious incantation that Master passed down as a foundation, I won't be worried at all even if my cultivation realm is a little weaker." Gu Ling bowed. At this moment, the language he spoke was no longer the extremely strange language that Luo Fan did not know at all. It was the language that Luo Fan was speaking at this moment, the language that corresponded to the Pangu characters. Gu Ling's innate aptitude was unimaginably strong. Her photographic memory was only ordinary. After reading it once just now, the soul-proving Tao formula had been engraved in the depths of his memory like a carving, and he could never forget it again. A faint smile appeared on Luo Fan's face. Dharma is only a way to prove one's Tao. Although you have the experience of achieving Tao in this world is different from other worlds. You can't slack off just because you have this experience. You must do everything you can to cultivate. Yes, Master. Gu Ling opened his mouth and said, "Rise. It's rare for you to be able to gather over 100 million life force to form such a space-time portal. I will refine this portal and make it into your natal celestial device. In the future, you will be able to use this celestial device to strengthen yourself with the power of the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven," Luo Fan continued. "Thank you, Master." Gu Ling was overjoyed. This white bone portal was not refined by Gu Ling himself. At that time, his cultivation realm had only reached the realm of true immortals, and his power had only reached the peak of the realm of true immortals. How could he break through the chaotic void that even the golden immortal Luo Fan could not distort? The white bone portal had appeared because it had gathered over 100 million life force that had achieved Tao within the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven. With the help of its unique power as the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things, it had combined all their strength and cultivation together. Through the supreme power of the great Tao, it had communicated with the 10,000 bones rebirth heaven and the chaotic void, and finally formed this space-time portal. This space-time portal could be said to be the highest achievement of the 10,000 Bones Rebirth Heaven. Adding on Gu Ling's experience in controlling the 10,000 Bones Rebirth Heaven for billions of years, if he could control this space-time portal, he would definitely be able to control the 10,000 Bones Rebirth Heaven indirectly. In the future, he would be able to use this white bone portal to obtain the blessing of the 10,000 Bones Rebirth Heaven and pass through endless tribulations. Luo Fan did not care about Gu Ling. With a thought, the wind and clouds within a radius of 10,000 miles instantly stirred. The monstrous devil chi that had originally spread out was instantly drawn out and condensed in front of him. Gradually, it transformed into his original form. It was a devil chi that was the condensation of endless brutality, madness, death, and breeding power. As Luo Fan transformed the space, the devil chi continued to condense. In the blink of an eye, it had formed a pitch-black sphere with a diameter of 10 feet in front of Luo Fan. This pitch-black sphere was solid, tough, and condensed. It was not inferior to diamond. As the sphere took shape, the devil chi that had filled the void within a radius of 10,000 miles completely disappeared. The void in this area became extremely natural. As the void changed, the devil chi that had originally filled the void within a radius of 10,000 miles rapidly surged in. It kept rushing into the void within a radius of 10,000 miles. Then, Luo Fan used the power of the void to condense and transform it into the black sphere in front of him. This process lasted for 2 hours. After 2 hours, the black sphere in front of Luo Fan had already expanded to a diameter of 10 feet. In total, its volume had increased by at least 1,000 times. The devil chi that had originally filled the void within a radius of 10,000 miles had been completely eliminated. Apart from the heavenly bone sacred stone and the white bone portal, there were no other traces of the 10,000 Bones Rebirth Heaven in the chaotic world. After condensing this demonic sphere, Luo Fan raised his hand and pressed down gently. The sphere with a diameter of 10 feet began to compress slowly. It gradually compressed from its original diameter of 10 feet to 9 feet, 8 feet, 7 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet, 9 feet. In the end, it compressed into a fist-sized sphere in front of Luo Fan. As the sphere continued to compress, countless turbidity, chaos, violence, and madness seeped out of it. Then, the primordial world's mysterious space rippled slightly before disappearing without a trace. When it had been compressed to the size of a fist, the sphere was only left with the pure aura of death and the power of reproduction. It was no longer black like before. Instead, it had turned into a hazy, transparent color. Light flowed within it, and it was crystal clear. It seemed to contain endless life force, as if a supreme great Tao was being nurtured within it. This was the supreme change that had occurred when the power of reproduction and the aura of death had reached a certain extreme. The power of reproduction and the aura of death represented the two extremes of yin and yang. When they were compressed to the point of the sphere in Luo Fan's hand, the power of the two finally underwent a miraculous transformation. It produced a change that even Gu Ling, who was the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things, could not understand. So, it should be barely enough. Luo Fan slightly smiled. He raised his hand and pointed, and the colorless sphere that was the size of a fist suddenly seemed to split the heavens and the earth, giving birth to endless explosive changes. In the blink of an eye, the power of nurturing and the aura of death erupted and formed a mysterious and indescribable space. This space seemed to exist and not exist. It seemed illusory and real. There were even the shadows of billions of living beings living and reproducing within it. Gu Ling looked at Luo Fan's actions, and understanding flashed through his eyes. Suddenly, he seemed to understand many mysteries that he could not understand no matter how he thought about it. Perhaps he had already become used to it because he had seen too many things, but he did not know what they were. So this is how the heaven of myriad bones is formed. Gu Ling could not help but murmur. No, no. The formation of the heaven of myriad bones is billions of times more complicated than this. The void within the sphere is just an illusion. It's the information contained in the power of reproduction and the aura of death. It can only be considered a billionth of the projection left behind when the heaven of myriad bones was formed. If you mistake it for the true form of the heaven of myriad bones, then it would be a mistake, Luo Fan pointed out. Luo Fan's cultivation was so profound that he could see the change earlier more clearly than Gu Ling's consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things. The information he obtained was hundreds or thousands of times more than Gu Ling's, so he instantly understood the true nature of the change. Disciple understands. Gu Ling was extremely glad that he had a master. He could not help but think, it's good to have a master. If it were not for Luo Fan, he would not have been able to see even a billionth of the projection of the heaven of myriad bones when it was formed. After all, it was formed under the special conditions of the heaven of myriad bones. It was formed from the most persistent and deepest will of all living things in the universe. It had been billions of years since the heaven of myriad bones was formed. The information left behind when the heaven of myriad bones was formed had been worn away by the passage of time. It was already fragmented and irretrievable. Even if he was born with a special status, he would not be able to see the true form of the heaven of myriad bones from it. Luo Fan nodded and raised his hand. The small sphere that contained the illusory space floated up and arrived above the white bone door in the blink of an eye. The small sphere was instantly fixed in place. It was as if it was being dragged by an incredibly strong and stable force as it slowly rotated in the void. As it rotated, an incredibly strong and mysterious suction force was emitted from the illusory space within the small sphere. Under this mysterious suction force, even the connate essence energy that was closest to the small sphere and came into contact with it did not move at all. However, the 10,000 feet tall white bone door that was not far from the small sphere began to shake violently as if it was being pulled by a huge hand. Crack, a sound that sounded like space shattering suddenly rang out from the white bone door. Luo Fan's eyes saw through the space within a radius of 10,000 miles. In an instant, he saw that it was the sound of the white bone door, which had originally merged with the space of the primordial world, leaving the space and beginning to be pulled. After this sound, a series of strange sounds rang out continuously. Rumble, boom, whoosh, woo. Following this sound, the white bone door gradually floated up due to the suction force and slowly floated toward the small sphere above the white bone door. Moreover, as it floated over, the white bone door began to shrink rapidly. By the time the white bone door came into contact with the small sphere, the white bone door had already shrunk to a size smaller than the small sphere. Then, the small sphere opened, closed, and rotated, directly swallowing the white bone door. A small pocket-sized white bone door appeared within the small sphere. Chapter 308. Chapter 308. The Great Tribulation of Heaven and Earth. As the unusually tall and mysterious white bone door entered the fist-sized ball, the ball gradually began to undergo some mysterious and inexplicable changes. After this mysterious change, the ball gradually emitted an indescribable aura. This aura seemed to contain endless profound mysteries. It had the power to attract the attention and mind of any living being. Luo Fan's expression did not change at all. He only raised his hand and waved it gently. The ball that had sucked the huge white bone door into it suddenly trembled and disappeared instantly. When it reappeared, it was already in Luo Fan's hand. He gently grabbed it. Impressively, Luo Fan had used his mastery of the 10,000 miles of void to distort the void and move this thing. After holding the ball, Luo Fan did not hesitate, nor did he need to think too much. With just a thought, an incomparably powerful will split off, bringing with it the power of the heavens and the earth, reaching a profound level. It directly passed through the barrier of the sphere's surface and suddenly rushed into the sphere's illusory space. In an instant, the illusory space within the ball was suddenly filled with lightning and thunder. Endless changes of the world suddenly appeared within it. The originally peaceful space instantly seemed to welcome the end of the world. In the blink of an eye, the world was enveloped by endless lightning, and endless dangers appeared everywhere in the world. The countless living beings in the illusory space were completely shattered at that moment, instantly turning into powder. Billions of living beings were destroyed just like that. Seeing such a world-destroying scene, Luo Fan's mind and consciousness did not waver at all. As he thought about it, the endless lightning quickly shuttled back and forth in the illusory space like electric dragons, circulating wildly. In the blink of an eye, it had formed 36 extremely complicated and profound restrictions that seemed to contain all the mysteries of the world and all living beings. The moment the restrictions were formed, they produced an endless suction force. This incomparably huge and profound force targeted the endless connate origin chi in the primordial world and the endless demonic chi in the heaven of rebirth of bones. The connate origin chi in the primordial world was outside the ball, but the origin chi in the heaven of rebirth of bones was behind the white bone door. In other words, it was inside the ball, inside the 36 restrictions. The two forces instantly surged into the 36 restrictions, one from the inside and the other from the outside. The amount of connate origin chi and demonic chi that surged in was unimaginable. In an instant, two huge vortexes were formed in the space between the inside and the outside. Like millstones, they ground the 36 restrictions from the inside and the outside. As the two forces, one on the inside and one on the outside, the 36 restrictions gradually changed. Gradually, they fused with the sphere, the illusory space, and the mysterious white bone door. Gradually, they became one and could no longer be separated. It was as if they were born to be one. This change lasted for a long time. Although the endless connate origin chi from the outside world was huge, because of Luo Fan's control, the vortex formed was small. It was like a pocket-sized model gathered in Luo Fan's palm and only wrapped a thin layer around the ball. Therefore, Luo Fan, who controlled the vortex and the suction force, was not affected by the vortex. Instead, because he controlled the vortex in his hand, countless sounds appeared in the void around him, making him seem like the creator of the world. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, 49 days had passed. On this day, a thunderous sound suddenly rang out from Luo Fan's palm. Following this sound, the powerful suction force that had existed for the past 49 days disappeared instantly. The vortex, which had been spinning inside and outside the ball and grinding the 36 restrictions, disappeared at the same time. The world inside the ball became clear. Countless living beings were quickly being reborn in the illusory space inside the ball. Before the thunderous sound stopped, the space that had been like a dead zone had returned to its previous state of prosperity and vitality. Moreover, the ball in Luo Fan's hand had already turned into a very ordinary and simple stone ball. It didn't have any trace of mysteriousness, nor did it emit any trace of aura fluctuations. At this moment, the ball looked like it had been casually picked up from the ground. At most, it was a stone ball that had been slightly polished into a ball. Now that this treasure has been refined, it contains the supreme control hub of the 10,000 Bones rebirth. Let's call it the 10,000 Bones Heavenly Tao. After the treasure turned into an ordinary stone ball, Luo Fan smiled and said to Guling, who had not dared to blink for 49 days. "Thank you, Master. You've worked hard." Guling hurriedly bowed. Luo Fan smiled slightly. He raised his hand and gently waved it. Gu Lingji's body was affected by an incomparably powerful force. He stood up without any ability to resist. The power of this treasure is not weak, but you must not be tempted by its power. In the future, you must focus on your own cultivation. This artifact can protect you during your tribulation, but you can't put the cart before the horse and place too much importance on it, Luo Fan said. Disciple understands, Guling hurriedly said. When Luo Fan saw this, he handed the ball to Guling. Guling received the ball excitedly. The moment he touched it, his body trembled. The ball was extremely heavy. Holding it, Guling felt like he was holding a mountain that was several million feet tall. If it wasn't for the familiar feeling that he was holding a part of his body, he would not have been able to hold the ball. In an instant, Guling understood that the ball was not only extremely powerful, but it also had a close connection with him. It was probably not inferior to anything he had encountered in the heaven of myriad bones rebirth. With a slight thought, he buried his consciousness into this ordinary stone ball. In an instant, he felt as if he had passed through a strange space-time gap and arrived in another boundless, all-inclusive space that contained endless essence chi. This is the interior of this artifact? Guling stared blankly at the boundless world before him. He was shocked to the point that he had reached an unimaginable level. As he thought about it, he arrived in the center of this all-inclusive space, in front of the towering white bone door that covered the entire world. This was the door that connected to the heaven of myriad bones rebirth. Guling was extremely sure of this. However, this door was vastly different from the white bone door that he had refined with the power of hundreds of millions of enlightened beings. In the past, his white bone door had relied on the power of countless enlightened beings to forcefully break through the heaven of myriad bones rebirth. Then, he had used the method of elimination to find the primordial world and come into contact with the power of the entire heaven of myriad bones rebirth. Therefore, after the passage was formed, although it had already merged with the space of the primordial world, it still felt incompatible with the primordial world. Anyone who saw this white bone door would know that it was an item from the outer realm of the primordial world. The white bone door had appeared because of a certain life form in the void outside the primordial world. Under such circumstances, the white bone gate would naturally give birth to a desire for the intruder. It was as if the white bone door could not pass through life forms that were too powerful. As long as it was an enlightened being in the heaven of myriad bones rebirth, it would definitely not be able to pass through this door. This was also the reason why Guling could not use the white bone door to enter the primordial world, even though he had used the power of hundreds of millions of enlightened beings to create this white bone door. He could only send the lives wrapped in the heavenly bone stone over. His goal was to allow these lives to return with a clear mind and explain what kind of place the primordial world was. However, at this moment, the white bone door had undergone an extremely huge change after being refined by his master. This change was so powerful that it was as mysterious and unbelievable as when he had witnessed the heaven of myriad bones rebirth bestowing life upon a certain skeleton that had appeared out of thin air. At this moment, the entire door had already fused with the illusory space. At a glance, one could no longer see the slightest difference between the white bone door and the illusory space. Moreover, the restriction that the white bone door had on the strength of those who entered and left had been completely eliminated. Guling could even feel that if he was still at the peak of the perfected immortal realm in the heaven of myriad bones rebirth, he would definitely be able to pass through this door easily. He would definitely be able to enter the heaven of myriad bones rebirth with ease and bring out all the living beings he wished to bring out. This change seemed simple, but only Guling, who had done it before, knew how difficult it was. It should be known that Guling had spent tens of thousands of years researching this problem wholeheartedly after the white bone door had formed. In the end, he had not gained anything at all. To the primordial world, although the white bone door had only been formed for less than 10,000 years, due to the difference in time between the heaven of myriad bones rebirth and the primordial world, billions of years had passed in the heaven of myriad bones rebirth. With a thought, Guling shifted his attention to another location. He shifted his attention to the countless living beings in the illusory space. He was even more shocked by what he saw. Every single one of those living beings was extremely lifelike. They were alive, they were dead, they had gratitude and enmity, they were persistent, They experienced all sorts of joys and sorrows, and they even had boundless hearts that sought the Tao. All of this caused these boundless living beings to be utterly unable to discern exactly how they were different from real living beings. The more Guling observed the illusory space, the more shocked he became. His admiration for Luo Fan became even more difficult to suppress. He even had the thought of staying in this space forever and never going out. At this moment, a faint sigh seemed to come from the bottom of his heart. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. Guling, who was about to be immersed in the illusory space, was instantly awakened. Guling's heart trembled. His consciousness instantly left the illusory space and returned to his body. When he opened his eyes, he realized that the person who had sighed was Luo Fan. Seeing his master, he recalled Luo Fan's previous warning. He could not help but feel ashamed. He bowed and said, "I forgot for a moment. Master, please forgive me. It doesn't matter to me whether you forgive me or not. What's important is whether you can truly understand the original intention of refining this Dharma artifact." Luo Fan sighed. "Master, please guide me." Guling's face turned red. "I refined this Dharma artifact because I saw that this white bone door had gathered too much of your effort. It would be a pity if you gave up just like that. In addition, the primordial world will soon welcome a great tribulation of heaven and earth. If you don't have a Dharma artifact to protect you, you won't be able to survive this tribulation with just your cultivation. However, it's not to let you enjoy the feeling of omnipotence." Luo Fan sighed. "I'm ashamed." Guling hurriedly knelt and said, "Get up. It's good that you remember this. Also, refine this 10,000 bones heavenly Tao and cultivate well in the future. With your fate with this Dharma artifact, if you can achieve the Tao again, this Dharma artifact might become a Dharma treasure," Luo Fan said calmly. "I understand." Guling bowed and said. Luo Fan waved his hand and an invisible force lifted Guling up. When Luo Fan said that there would be a great tribulation in the primordial world in the future, Guling was reflecting on himself because he had been reprimanded by Luo Fan. However, he did not think much about it. Now that Luo Fan had finished reprimanding him, he thought about it and was shocked. He said, "May I ask, Master, when will the great tribulation of primordial world occur? Why would such a great tribulation appear? There are clues about this in your memory, but it comes from the heaven of reincarnation." Luo Fan nodded and said, "I see." Guling came to a sudden realization when he heard that. He was the consciousness of the heaven of rebirth of all bones, the spirit of all things. He was naturally connected to the billions of worlds in the universe. This naturally included the heaven of reincarnation and the countless living beings in it. With the remaining consciousness of life, that he had been reborn from the heaven of reincarnation, he could roughly know about the abnormal situation in the heaven of reincarnation over the past billions of years. However, Luo Fan had not explained it to him previously, so he only felt that it was abnormal. After explaining it, he thought about it and instantly understood the reason for the abnormal changes. He also understood how serious the great tribulation of primordial world would be. Guling's expression changed drastically. He opened his mouth and shouted, "If that's the case, it's terrible. According to what I know, the power of the heaven of reincarnation has reached an unimaginable level. Although the heaven of rebirth of all bones has gathered the bones of billions of worlds in the universe, the power developed is far less than a 10,000th of the heaven of reincarnation. Moreover, the living beings of the heaven of reincarnation have a subtle connection with the hearts of all living beings. If the hearts of living beings undergo a specific change, they can directly travel through any space through this connection. If the primordial world is targeted by the heaven of reincarnation, it will be troublesome." As Guling spoke, his eyes flashed. When he saw Luo Fan, he could not help but relax. He said, "I have been rude. If the primordial world has several powerful people like Master, then even if 10 more of the heaven of reincarnation come, they will not be able to pose any threat. You have relaxed too early. In the primordial world, I am the strongest existence. The strongest of the others are probably just like you when you were still the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living beings. Luo Fan shook his head and said calmly. This. When Guling heard this, he could not help but be stunned. A mixture of joy and worry appeared on his face. He was naturally happy because Luo Fan was the strongest person in the primordial world. His strength was powerful and his status was unimaginably high. If he became his disciple, his future would be quite promising. However, he was worried because there was only one Luo Fan in the primordial world. Compared to the limitless power that he possessed, the future of the primordial world was rather bleak. When Luo Fan first met him, he had already used his ability to clearly see everything about the ancient spirit from the inside out, from top to bottom, from memories to the core of his spiritual sense. Naturally, he also understood the ancient spirit's memories and knew how powerful the heaven of reincarnation was. Seeing the change in Guling's expression, he knew what she was thinking. He said, "You don't have to think too much about it. I have already predicted this great calamity tens of thousands of years ago. You only need to cultivate with all your heart and you will definitely be able to survive this great calamity in the future." Disciple understands. When Gu Ling heard Luo Fan's words, he suppressed the joy and worry in his heart and said, Gu Ling could not be any clearer about Luo Fan's strength from his previous performances. Hearing Luo Fan's words, he naturally believed in him completely. Even though the strength of his heavenly transformation had already shocked him, he believed that Luo Fan would have a way to deal with it. It's precisely because you opened the spatial gate that led to the primordial world that the billions of worlds in the universe were shaken. As a result, several other worlds found a crack and opened the spatial gate to invade the primordial world. Come with me to deal with this matter first and refine the heavenly Tao of 10,000 bones along the way. It will be of great use when the time comes. Luo Fan said indifferently when he saw that Gu Ling had already understood the truth of the matter. This disciple obeys. Gu Ling could not help but feel slightly ashamed as he bowed. Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed. An invisible force suddenly appeared and instantly covered the ground. The heavenly bone holy stone that was still wrapped in life was completely wrapped in this invisible force. As the invisible force wrapped around them, the heavenly bone holy stone began to sway slightly. Then, they instantly left the ground and floated in the air. There were 1,296 pieces of heavenly bone holy stone, and there were also 1,296 skeletal life forms. Over 1,000 pieces of heavenly bone holy stone floated in the air. They were like stars in the sky, appearing rather beautiful. With a thought from Luo Fan, the heavenly bone holy stone suddenly turned around. All of them took a different path from the other heavenly bone holy stone, but they all contained some sort of natural mystery. In the end, their target was the ball in Gu Ling's hand. In the blink of an eye, it directly entered the area around the white bone door in the middle of the illusory space. It could even be said to be a simple and crude formation. It absorbed the various types of yuan qi that filled the illusory space and poured them into its body, tempering the skeletal life that was wrapped within. Thank you, Master. Gu Ling was slightly stunned, but he immediately understood what Luo Fan had done and could not help but thank him. Chapter 309. Dragon Emperor's Power. Heavenly Poison. Luo Fan did not respond to Gu Ling's gratitude. He had only done it out of convenience. However, it was not all for the sake of the creatures trapped in the holy heavenly bone rock. He was more worried that these creatures would cause trouble after leaving the holy heavenly bone rock, which would negatively affect the ancient spirits. As a result, he directly said, "Stop talking. Come with me." With that, with a thought, a wondrous sound of the ways appeared beneath Luo Fan and Gu Ling's feet. the wondrous sound of the ways appeared out of nowhere. Following the appearance of the cloud, Luo Fan and Gu Ling's bodies were supported by a huge yet gentle force. Their bodies moved extremely slowly along with the cloud, but in the blink of an eye, they had already arrived at a place thousands of miles above the ground. The entire process happened naturally, like the wind blowing through the leaves, like the rising and setting of the moon. It was impossible to find any signs of human intervention. Gu Ling had never seen such a wondrous method of flight before. At that moment, she was completely drawn in by the wondrous mysteries contained within the cloud. She could no longer express her gratitude towards Luo Fan. The cloud was condensed naturally from Luo Fan's direct command. It was not man-made. It naturally contained the endless mysteries of the ways of the world, so its speed was unimaginable. When Guling gradually recovered from the profound mysteries contained in the cloud and was able to control her emotions, the cloud had already brought Luo Fan and Guling across a distance of billions of miles and arrived at the location of another space-time portal. This is the space-time portal that the big yellow dragon Emperor Heaven's living beings expended an infinite amount of power to open. You should be very familiar with it. Luo Fan stood on the auspicious cloud and pointed forward. With that, Gu Ling's expression changed. She observed carefully and sensed with rapt attention. Only then did she realize that it was just as Luo Fan had said. At this moment, the region in front of Luo Fan and Gu Ling was filled with the innate energy of the primordial world and the power of the Dragon Emperor that only existed in Great Yellow Emperor Heaven apart from the innate energy of the primordial world. Of course, perhaps this energy was a type of demonic dragon in the eyes of the primordial world, but no matter what, it was something he had learned from the information he had obtained from the beings that had come from Great Yellow Emperor Heaven. It was an energy that only existed in Great Yellow Emperor Heaven. This Yuan Qi was pale gold in color, and it contained an enormous might that could suppress heaven and earth and all living things. So it is this world. Looks like their luck is really unimaginable. Gu Ling revealed a surprised expression as he said, "The myriad bones Heaven Dao has supreme power. It's extremely useful to deal with the spatial gate that contains the power of the spacetime. You can expand the eternal Heaven Dao and use its power to absorb the spatial gate. In this way, not only can you eliminate Great Yellow Emperor Heaven's invasion of the primordial world, but you can also strengthen the myriad bones Heaven Dao's power. It's killing two birds with one stone. Don't miss it," Luo Fan said flatly. He already knew what kind of world the Great Yellow Emperor Heaven was from Gu Ling's memory. He also knew what kind of living beings lived in it. Therefore, he naturally knew that the Great Yellow Emperor Heaven was only one of the more ordinary worlds among the billions of worlds in the universe. There were countless kinds of living beings in that world. Apart from the lizard dragons, the rest of them were rather ordinary. Therefore, those living beings respected the lizard dragons. They worshipped the lizard dragons as gods and accepted the lizard dragons' control for billions of years. The space-time portal could only be the work of a lizard dragon. Only a lizard dragon could pass through the portal. In the billions of years that the lizard dragons had been in control of the Great Yellow Dragon Emperor Heaven, they had developed an arrogant and greedy character. That characteristic was engraved in the depths of their souls. Even if Luo Fan could change it for a while, he could not change it forever. In addition, even if these lizard dragons were the strongest, they were only equivalent to cultivators who had achieved the Tao. For Luo Fan, it was not enough for him to spend so much power to change their mentality, so it was useless for the great calamity of the great desolate land. Therefore, Luo Fan did not have the thought of taking the lizard dragons for his own use like how he treated Gu Ling. He directly asked Gu Ling to absorb the spatial gate and cut off the connection between the Great Yellow Emperor Heaven and the primordial world. Yes. Gu Ling was overjoyed when she heard Luo Fan's order. As he spoke, he lifted his hand and pointed. The myriad bones of the way of heaven that he had taken into his soul's body shook and charged out of his body into the distance. In the blink of an eye, the myriad bones of the way of heaven, that looked like an ordinary stone ball, had arrived tens of thousands of kilometers away, where the Dragon Emperor power was the densest. There, the faint golden power of the Dragon Emperor had already condensed into a huge golden vortex. The vortex was 100,000 meters wide. The deeper it went, the more condensed and dazzling the golden light became. When it reached the center of the vortex, the golden light was extremely dazzling and turned into a strange black color. It was as if nobody's eyes could withstand the light's stimulation and would naturally ignore it out of self-protection. This was the opposite of what happened when things reached an extreme. In reality, it was the spatial gate that connected the great yellow Emperor Heaven to the primordial world. The spatial gate was completely different from the myriad bones reborn heaven. It did not have a real body. The entire spatial gate was purely formed by using the tiny cracks that were formed when Gu Ling probed the passageways of the heaven and earth back then. He used the endless Dragon Emperor power to prop them open and stabilize them. Seriously speaking, instead of calling the spatial gate a door, it was more like a vortex. At this moment, something happened to come out of the great yellow Emperor Heaven Gate. Gu Ling raised his eyebrows. He controlled the myriad bones of the way of heaven to turn slightly and produced an extremely mysterious force that swept toward that thing. In the blink of an eye, the thing that had just rushed out of the Dragon Emperor power vortex and was still in a daze was pulled out. At a closer look, it was none other than a 3-meter-long creature that was unusually ferocious. However, the lines on its body were smooth, and its scales were exquisite. It looked extremely beautiful and adorable. It was also a tiny lizard dragon that emitted a mighty aura. "Master, this dragon is quite cute. I wonder if I can keep it as a mount?" Gu Ling was overjoyed when he saw the creature. He pleaded to Luo Fan. Luo Fan naturally didn't mind. In fact, the moment the creature appeared, he had already seen it clearly with the help of the golden eyes of the great sun and the bright moon's silver eyes. He even had a complete grasp of its past and future. He naturally knew that this creature was not simple and was quite fated with Gu Ling. It was suitable for Gu Ling to use as a mount. Thus, he nodded and said, "Sure. I have a technique called the Mother-Child Divine Technique. You can use the power of this technique to leave a restriction in this dragon's soul so that it won't betray you in the future." Although Gu Ling looked down on such a weak little dragon that he could even use his soul to subdue, he knew that his master's remarkable abilities definitely made sense. Thus, he didn't hold back and said, "Thank you, master." Luo Fan nodded. He raised his hand and pointed. A speck of spiritual light rushed out of his hand and instantly burrowed into Gu Ling's soul. With a turn, it rushed into Gu Ling's mind and mind. It turned into a technique that contained countless words and images and integrated into his memory. With a thought, Gu Ling scanned through the memories. The power of this art was inconceivably profound, but it was not overly complicated. With just a glance, Gu Ling had already mastered this art. He raised his hand and pointed, and a complicated and mysterious 3-dimensional talisman rushed out of his hand. In an instant, it crossed the void and rushed straight into the space between the little dragon's eyebrows. It instantly burrowed into its body and completely merged with the core of the little dragon's soul. As the 3-dimensional talisman merged, the lizard dragon suddenly felt sorrow and tears instantly fell. This little dragon looked extremely small, but in fact, it was the reincarnation of the strongest life in the great yellow Dragon Emperor Heaven. Its innate aptitude was high. Although it couldn't compare to Gu Ling, who was the consciousness of the heaven and earth and the spirit of all living things in the myriad bones rebirth heaven, it was not much worse than him. But he didn't want to spend so much effort, and so much effort to be reincarnated into the untainted land. The moment he stepped into the untainted land, a restriction was placed on his soul. From then on, He no longer had control over his life, and could only be a slave. How could he not be sad and aggrieved? Gu Ling naturally didn't know the background of the creature in front of him. The moment the mother-child divine art entered the depths of the little dragon's spirit soul, he felt as if he had formed a very subtle and close connection with the little dragon. It was as if he could control the little dragon's life and death with just a slight movement of his mind, and he could understand the little dragon's thoughts. This feeling was even more mysterious and intense than when he controlled the lives and emotions of the infinite living beings in the myriad bones rebirth heaven for the consciousness of the heaven and earth. With a thought, the little dragon's thoughts instantly flowed through Gu Ling's mind. So your ancestor Sky Dragon? I didn't expect you to be willing to abandon your position as the top expert in the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven to reincarnate and step into the untainted land. Gu Ling was shocked and exclaimed the moment he understood the little dragon's thoughts. Ancestor Sky Dragon was the top expert in the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven. Gu Ling obtained this information from the memories of the skeletons in the myriad bones rebirth heaven in the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven. Although the space-time portal in front of Gu Ling and Luo Fan was mysterious and incredible, it was created by a living being in the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven, so it was naturally not stable. It could not even compare to the space-time portal created by Gu Ling with the power of billions of living beings that had attained the Tao. It could not accommodate living beings that were too powerful. However, in order to step into the portal, Ancestor Sky Dragon had abandoned all his power and cultivation base. He had stepped into the portal without hesitation. This was truly amazing. Gu Ling had been very envious of Ancestor Sky Dragon's prestige, freedom, and respect from billions of people. However, he did not expect the living being, who was originally envied by the consciousness of the heaven and earth and was envied by all living beings, to become so weak. This made him lose his composure. How do you know me? I haven't been in the world for billions of years, and even my body has changed. How can you recognize me? Unless you're the living being that ascended from the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven to the immortal world. The young dragon was initially feeling sad, but he was shocked when he suddenly heard a voice that he did not expect even in his dreams. The shock instantly suppressed his sadness, and he could not help but ask, "Ha ha! You'll know who I am in the future. Come here first, I have more important things to do." Gu Ling had recovered from his shock. He raised his hand and summoned Ancestor Sky Dragon to his side without any resistance. He lay on the auspicious cloud under Luo Fan's feet. Ancestor Sky Dragon was instantly stunned when he got close to the auspicious cloud. This is the immortal world. Tears streamed down Ancestor Sky Dragon's face after a while, and his body trembled slightly. After a while, old Ancestor Sky Dragon murmured, "So that's how it is, so that's how it is. To be able to obtain such a secret of the supreme Tao of heaven and earth, it's worth it even if I have to be enslaved for eternity." This was the result of Ancestor Tianlong's amazing aptitude. After seeing the magic cloud condensed by Luo Fan's command in the untainted world, he instantly received the mystery of heaven and earth and the sound of the great Tao. He had comprehended the bottleneck of the individual immortal realm that had troubled him for hundreds of millions of years. After comprehending this bottleneck, his strength, body, and cultivation realm would still be equivalent to the deity reversion realm. But in the future, as long as he had enough strength, he could easily achieve Tao. If his energy increased again, he could even easily reach the realm of true immortality. Seeing the change of Ancestor Sky Dragon, Luo Fan's expression changed slightly. His heart is so firm, no wonder he's... Countless images flashed through Luo Fan's mind. In those images, Ancestor Sky Dragon was the main character. However, at that time, Ancestor Sky Dragon was already powerful enough to destroy the world. That was Ancestor Sky Dragon's future achievement. Gu Ling did not care about what Ancestor Sky Dragon was thinking at this moment. He raised his hand and pointed. The ball in the distance instantly swelled up and rushed forward. It swallowed the space-time portal that was condensed by countless Dragon Emperor power in the Yellow Dragon Emperor Heaven. A mysterious and indescribable mystery of space-time was revealed in this process. Through some incredible changes, it stirred the mysterious and powerful Great Tao in the dark and produced a strange change. In an instant, the myriad bones' heavenly way condensed a bit and its power increased a bit. The illusory space opened up also increased a bit. Gu Ling was very satisfied with the strengthening of the myriad bones' heavenly way. With a thought, the myriad bones' heavenly way rotated and sucked in the Dragon Emperor power within a range of billions of miles. The surrounding void was completely restored to its original state without any erosion of the Dragon Emperor power. After obtaining such a huge amount of Dragon Emperor power, the myriad bones' heavenly way was only slightly filled and did not improve much. Gu Ling responded to the myriad bones' heavenly way's changes. He was both happy and worried. He was happy that the myriad bones' heavenly way only improved so little after absorbing so much power, which proved that its power was incredibly powerful. On the other hand, he was worried that the myriad bones' heavenly way's improvement required so much power. In that case, he would need to spend a lot of effort to refine it into a treasure in the future. Master, I've completed my task. Gu Ling recalled the myriad bones' heavenly way and bowed at Luo Fan. Ancestor Sky Dragon is the only one who has entered this place because of Ancestor Sky Dragon's scheme. There's no need to care about it anymore. Follow me to the next location. It should be a mess now, but you'll have to get busy, said Luo Fan faintly. I'm ashamed. When Gu Ling heard Luo Fan's words, he recalled that these were the sins he had left behind when he probed the void in the past. He could not help but feel ashamed. Luo Fan ignored him and nodded. With a thought, the auspicious cloud that allowed Ancestor Sky Dragon to comprehend the bottleneck of the itinerant Immortal Realm and perfected Immortal Realm turned and floated towards the next location at a seemingly slow but actually fast speed. During this process, Ancestor Sky Dragon lay on the auspicious cloud and stared closely at every change of the auspicious cloud. His ears pricked up high as he listened to every trace of the great Tao sound that the auspicious cloud emitted. He carefully comprehended every bit of the great Tao of nature contained within it. His expression became more and more intoxicated with the changes of the auspicious cloud. He did not even have the mood to care about the culprit that controlled his soul. He only glared at him fiercely. After a short while, the auspicious cloud had already traversed more than 50 billion miles and arrived at an area that was originally a mountain. This area was already a mess. The entire space within 1,000,000 miles was filled with a faint yellow mist. This yellow mist was filled with a kind of corrosive power. This was a kind of vitality that Gu Ling was very familiar with and also hated, the poison of the heavens. Seeing this vitality, Gu Ling knew where the spacetime door in front of him came from. He also knew why Luo Fan had said that he needed trouble. This poison of the heavens could only be found in one world among the billions of worlds in the heavens, the Yellow Turban Heaven. The creatures that lived in this world were very strange. They were gaseous life forms, and they were born to fuse with the Yellow Turban Sky's Empyrean poison. The entire world was their living space. As a result, the number of life forms in the Yellow Turban Heaven was even greater than the 1,000 Bones Rebirth Heaven that gathered all the skeletons of the billions of worlds in the heavens. Moreover, because the life forms were gaseous and lived in the poison of the heavens that could even corrode the world, their characteristics were extremely strange. As a result, the life forms in the Yellow Turban Heaven were more difficult to deal with than the life forms in any of the billions of worlds in the heavens. At this moment, just how many life forms were there in the poison of the heavens that covered 1,000,000 miles? Gu Ling looked at Luo Fan pitifully, hoping to get a hint from Luo Fan. This is a sin that you've created, but you need to deal with it, Luo Fan encouraged indifferently. After saying this, Luo Fan remained expressionless. He did not say anything, nor did he do anything. He just stood there quietly. Chapter 310. Although Gu Ling was unwilling, he did not slack off once he made up his mind. With a thought, he moved. His soul wrapped around the great way of 10,000 bones and rushed towards the area where the poison of heaven could corrode even space. The poison of heaven was extremely powerful and mysterious. Because the space of the untainted world contained endless mysteries and was extremely stable, it was unable to corrode the space of the untainted world. However, because of its power, the poison of heaven in front of him had a mysterious characteristic that other worlds' primordial chi did not have. The special characteristic was that the poison of heaven and the space of the untainted world had a very strange power of adhesion. This kind of adhesion caused the power of heaven and the space of the primordial world to be entangled like a few threads that were tangled into ropes through some complicated method. Without spending a lot of effort and understanding of the mysteries of space in the primordial world, it would be difficult to separate them. If Luo Fan took action, he would only need to wave his hand. With a thought, he would be able to collect the poison of heaven, compress it into a ball, and turn it into a refining material. However, for Gu Ling, whose power had been weakened to the limit and who could only rely on the mysteries of the heavenly Tao of 10,000 bones, to get rid of the poison of heaven in front of him, he needed to enter the poison of heaven and find its source. In other words, he needed to find the location of the space portal that connected the yellow turban heaven and the untainted land, and then use the heavenly Tao of 10,000 bones to store the portal. Only then could he use the displacement of the spacetime portal to absorb the poison of heaven and the endless gaseous life forms living in it into the great way of 10,000 bones. Luo Fan secretly nodded as he looked at Gu Ling's figure that had no hesitation. With a thought, the auspicious cloud under his feet, which contained the endless mysteries of the great Tao of heaven and earth, disappeared into thin air. It was as if the auspicious cloud had never appeared. The poison of heaven contained billions of gaseous life forms. The spacetime portal that connected the yellow turban heaven and the untainted world was hidden among the billions of gaseous life forms. If Gu Ling wanted to find the source of the poison of heaven, he had to search carefully. It was not something that could be done in a short period of time. Ah! Why is it gone? Right at this moment, Patriarch Tian Long, who was lying on the auspicious cloud, suddenly exclaimed, and he turned his head to look around in a rather bewildered manner. Ancestor Sky Dragon had been the #1 expert in the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven for tens of thousands of years, but he was able to abandon his lofty position and power to enter the primordial world. His determination to pursue the Tao had reached a point where even Luo Fan was moved. The moment he saw the auspicious cloud, he had focused all his attention on it. Just now, he had suddenly moved such a long distance away. He did not even notice that his master, Gu Ling, had been sent to the interior of the poison of heaven. Only when the cloud was suddenly dispersed by Luo Fan did he realize that the situation had changed. After looking around, old Ancestor Sky Dragon finally saw Luo Fan, who was sitting cross-legged in the void. When he saw Luo Fan's true appearance, he couldn't help but become even more perplexed. Previously, he was more attracted by the auspicious cloud and did not pay attention to Luo Fan at all. Now that he saw Luo Fan, he could not help but be secretly surprised. The person in front of him was just too ordinary. He was so ordinary that even in the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven, he was no different from a lowly commoner or even worse. However, it was obvious that the master who easily set up a restriction deep in his soul was this person's disciple. The person in front of him was definitely not as ordinary as he thought. I see that you're very determined to pursue the Tao, so I'll give you a clear path. Luo Fan smiled. This smile caused Patriarch Sky Dragon's heart to tremble. He felt as if his entire soul, mind, consciousness, and sea of consciousness had all become bright and clear. An extremely natural joy that came from the bottom of his heart suddenly filled his mental conception. Under this joy, everything around him seemed to become extremely beautiful. Even the breeze that blew by seemed to carry a sweet taste. After Luo Fan attained the grand heavenly Tao fruit, there wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't perfect. Every single move he made conformed to some sort of supreme truth, and it naturally contained supreme might. Even this smile of his was the same. Ancestor Sky Dragon had already comprehended the bottleneck of the rogue immortal realm and the perfected immortal realm. The mysteries that he sensed were extremely rich, and he was naturally affected more. Great Immortal, please give me some pointers. Ancestor Sky Dragon did not feel that he was affected. He only felt extremely comfortable and smiled unknowingly. The way he addressed Luo Fan followed the impression that the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven had of the primordial world. He regarded the primordial world as the immortal world, and the cultivators in the immortal world were naturally immortals. Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed, and a misty clear light rushed out from his hand. In an instant, it wrapped around the small dragon. It made Ancestor Sky Dragon feel as if he was wearing a thin layer of light gauze. In front of you is the poison of heaven that seeped out of the yellow turban heaven. It's quite powerful. If you want to obtain the Supreme Tao, you can enter it and follow Gu Ling. There will definitely be great benefits. Luo Fan smiled. After that, he took a meaningful look at old Ancestor Tian Long. His figure shook slightly and gradually disappeared in front of old Ancestor Tian Long like the ripples gradually calming down. With a single thought, he distorted the space within a radius of 30 feet. Then, with the help of his control over the space, he set up a formation that could accelerate the flow of time by 100 times within the 30 feet of space, and he hid himself within the formation. As for whether Ancestor Sky Dragon would listen to him, Luo Fan did not care at all. In fact, giving pointers to Ancestor Sky Dragon was just a convenience. If Ancestor Sky Dragon really had the courage to listen to him and enter the poison of heaven, his achievements in the future would be much higher. If he did not have the courage and hesitated, his achievements would naturally be lower. His choice would represent his fate. Everything was decided by him. Luo Fan had already given pointers on this matter. Ancestor Sky Dragon would naturally bear all the consequences of his choice. Ancestor Sky Dragon was slightly shocked when he saw Luo Fan disappear so naturally and in such disbelief, but that was all. No matter how strong Luo Fan's abilities were, he had already expected it. So, his natural disappearance was still within his expectations. He turned his head to look at the poison of heaven with a radius of 1,000,000 miles in the distance. There was a struggling look in his eyes. As the world's top expert who had suppressed the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven for tens of thousands of years, Ancestor Sky Dragon naturally had a lot of knowledge. Even if ordinary living beings did not know about it, he had also heard of the characteristics of another world. The poison of heaven in front of him was so powerful that he had naturally heard of its name. Because he had heard of it, he naturally knew that if he encountered the poison of heaven, even with his cultivation realm and power as the world's top expert, he dared not say that he could escape unscathed. At that moment, his power had almost been reduced to nothing. Under such circumstances, how could he not hesitate when Luo Fan suggested him to enter it? Forget it. This great divinity is extremely powerful. What right do I, a living being from a small world, have to be plotted against by him? Since he said so, it must be so. After hesitating for a while, Ancestor Sky Dragon finally saw through it. He gritted his teeth and flapped his wings to fly toward the poison of heaven. Not long after, he charged straight into the area. As he rushed in, the seemingly faint poison of heaven, which in fact contained countless strong and weak living beings, rushed toward him at high speed. The momentum was like a giant mouth that filled the heaven and earth, which was about to devour him. Ancestor Sky Dragon's expression did not change, and the light in his eyes did not dodge at all. Anyone with the potential to become a powerhouse must have one thing in common, which was that they would consider a lot before making a decision. They might even hesitate, but once they made a decision, they would definitely give it all and not turn back until they hit the wall. Ancestor Sky Dragon was naturally the same. At this moment, the misty clear light that Luo Fan emitted moved slightly. Like an invisible hand gently pushing the rolling ball away, it pushed away the heaven poison that was madly pouncing towards old Ancestor Sky Dragon, as well as the infinite amount of Yellow Turban Heaven's life force, preventing them from causing the slightest bit of damage. Feeling such a change, Ancestor Sky Dragon revealed a look of shock. He was naturally shocked that the light that Luo Fan casually sent out had such power. It could defend against the poison of heaven that even a peak itinerant immortal could not completely defend against. Sure enough, it was the same thing. Knowing that he no longer had to worry about his own safety, Ancestor Sky Dragon was overjoyed. He looked around and found Gu Ling's direction. He flapped his wings and quickly chased after Gu Ling. At this moment, Gu Ling was like a headless fly in the poison of the firmament, searching for the space-time door. The great Tao of myriad bones was above his head, emitting a mysterious and indescribable power that wrapped around his body and defended him against the endless poison of the firmament. Within the Yellow Turban Heaven, even the living beings were gaseous, so the space-time portal that was constructed was naturally gaseous as well. Furthermore, unlike the space-time portal constructed by the great Yellow Dragon Emperor Heaven, which was so eye-catching that one could tell that it was not an ordinary vortex, it was like the white bone portal constructed by an ancient spirit. It was a fixed and unchanging gaseous structure. Its mysteriousness and obscurity could be easily imagined. Although Gu Ling had the help of the mysterious myriad bones of Heaven's Way, it could only protect him from being harmed by the poison of heaven. However, he could not find any clue about the space-time portal. This is quite troublesome. This space-time portal was formed with the help of the space-time rift that I accidentally caused. There must be a lot of fluctuations of the space-time power, but why can't I feel anything? Gu Ling was rather hesitant. Under such circumstances, Gu Ling's speed was naturally not very fast. Ancestor Sky Dragon caught up with Gu Ling in a short while. What are you doing here? Gu Ling was sensing the abnormality in the surroundings, so he was immediately noticed when Ancestor Sky Dragon arrived. I'm Master's mount, so I naturally need to follow Master, Ancestor Sky Dragon said matter-of-factly. Good. Since you have this awareness, follow me wholeheartedly in the future, and you will definitely achieve tens of thousands of times more than you did before. Gu Ling laughed and said. Ancestor Sky Dragon only nodded and said nothing more. What Gu Ling said just now was already extremely forced for Ancestor Sky Dragon, which made him so disgusted that he almost vomited. It was impossible for him to say it again. Although Gu Ling had the mother and child divine technique and could know Ancestor Sky Dragon's inner thoughts at any time, he would not be so bored. He raised his hand and the myriad bones of Heaven's Way shook slightly and wrapped Ancestor Sky Dragon in a protective circle. After being wrapped by the power of the myriad bones of Heaven's Way, Ancestor Sky Dragon's body trembled slightly. He was very familiar with the power of the myriad bones of Heaven's Way, but it also had a slightly different aura. It seemed to be the Dragon Emperor's power that he had been immersed in for tens of thousands of years, but it also seemed to be of a higher level than the Dragon Emperor's power. This aura is the Heavenly Dragon Emperor's power that I can't condense for millions of years. Ancestor Sky Dragon was shocked. He had stayed at the peak of the itinerant immortal realm for such a long time, so he had naturally tried countless ways to break through the peak of the itinerant immortal realm. Condensing the Dragon Emperor's power was one of them. At this moment, when he sensed the aura of the myriad bones of Heaven's Way, he knew that this was the direction he had been pursuing for millions of years. If I had obtained a trace of this power earlier, I'm afraid I would have broken through long ago. Ancestor Sky Dragon had mixed feelings. Gu Ling naturally did not have the mood to understand Ancestor Sky Dragon's complicated feelings. The moment Ancestor Dragon Emperor stepped into the protective circle of the myriad bones of Heaven's Way, he instantly felt a very strange vibration in the entire Poison of Heaven area. The vibration instantly spread across a radius of millions of miles, and was instantly caught by Gu Ling, who was extremely sensitive. Got it? Gu Ling frowned and a trace of joy flashed across his mind. This kind of fluctuation was involuntarily produced by the Heaven Poison when it was affected by some kind of power that was countless times stronger than them. The vibration contained the undisguised aura of the entire Poison of Heaven. If he analyzed the aura, he would be able to understand the entire structure of the Poison of Heaven area, and then find the space-time portal hidden in the endless gaseous life forms. Gu Ling's eyes flashed, and he instantly saw the veil-like clear qi around Ancestor Sky Dragon's body. He instantly smiled, knowing that his master had helped him. Luo Fan was hidden in the space-time formation that he had casually set up. Although he had only casually set it up, the formation already contained the essence of his cultivation after attaining the primordial unity Dao fruit. It contained so many subtle mysteries that even Luo Fan, who was at the peak of the golden immortal realm, could not comprehend it at all. This could be seen from the fact that the space-time formation could accelerate time by 100 times. The formation had a radius of 10,000 feet. The chaotic qi below was rapidly accumulating and condensing, gradually turning into a layer of chaotic qi cloud that was getting thicker and thicker. This was Luo Fan. Luo Fan used his control of the space of the untainted world to absorb the endless innate qi in the void into the formation. Then, he used some mysterious power to transform it into chaotic qi, which piled up and formed a cloud that looked like the ground. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the void, Luo Fan's mind flashed with light. With Gu Ling's temperament and aptitude, it will take at least 3 years to find the spacetime portal, and another 3 years to collect it. The other spacetime portals were all created by the spacetime cracks created by Gu Ling's test. The living beings in the world did not completely control the portal. Even if there were living beings in the untainted world, their range of activity would not exceed 1,000,000 miles. Their power would also be quite weak, but there's no need to worry. It'll be fine even if I wait for a few hundred years. Luo Fan weighed the pros and cons. In the blink of an eye, he had already made a plan. He slowly closed his eyes, and countless mysterious spells and magical powers flowed through his mind. It would take Gu Ling 6 years to completely deal with the spacetime portal in Yellow Turban Heaven. This also meant that Luo Fan still had a full 600 years of time to use within the spacetime array. Naturally, he would not waste it. At this moment, the magical powers and spells that flowed through his mind were the 12,960 scriptures of the Dao Fruit's Way scripture. After attaining the Tai Dao fruit, Luo Fan's cultivation realm had risen to a terrifying level. He naturally had new ideas about the Dao Fruit's Way scripture that he had organized in the past, and he naturally had a new understanding of the various magical powers and spells. There were also countless new mysteries that could be added to it. Since that was the case, he naturally needed to sort it out and comprehend it. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, 600 years had passed in the spacetime formation. On this day, Luo Fan's mind moved, and he came back to his senses from the complicated process of organizing and comprehending the Dao Fruit's Way scripture. 600 years was an extremely short period of time to the current Luo Fan. During this period of time, he had only organized and comprehended less than 1,000th of the Dao Fruit's Way scripture. Even so, compared to 600 years ago, no matter if it was cultivation level or mana, he had a slight improvement. The power that he could unleash was even stronger than 600 years ago. Sensing his changes, Luo Fan felt happy, and at the same time, he understood how long the path of cultivation was. With a slight thought, the steel-like chaotic energy that had been accumulated over the past 600 years was instantly crushed. As if swallowed by a black hole, It instantly passed through all of Luo Fan's acupoints and poured into Luo Fan's body. Then, it was completely swallowed by the extremely mysterious Tai Dao fruit, adding a trace of undetectable power to the ever-changing magic power units in his body. Chapter 3:11. It was impossible to break through 8 gates in a row. After returning to the great wasteland, Luo Fan's eyes shone with a golden light. He could clearly see everything within 1,000,000 miles. The power of the great sun golden pupil and the bright moon silver pupil was inconceivably profound. Seeing through a radius of 1,000,000 miles was as easy as flipping his hand. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan already knew that after spending 6 years, Gu Ling and old ancestor Tian Long had worked together to completely refine the door that connected the Yellow Turban Heaven and the Great Wasteland. At the same time, they had completely absorbed a large amount of the poison of the firmament within a radius of 1,000,000 miles. At this moment, Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch were lying in a pile on a mountain more than 300,000 miles away from Luo Fan. From afar, one could only feel that their breathing was rising and falling rapidly, and their entire bodies were emitting a thick, baleful aura. One look was enough to tell that they were exhausted from the endless, dangerous battles. Although they were so tired, the current Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch were completely different from 6 years ago. The body of the ancient spirit that was lying there was at least 100 times more condensed than it was 6 years ago. Right now, he looked completely like a real physical body. There was not a single trace of blurriness or instability on his body. In fact, he even had a stronger sense of existence than a physical body of flesh and blood. The Sky Dragon Patriarch's change was even greater. At this moment, his body had grown more than 100 times larger. Originally, it was less than 10 feet tall, but now it was 1,000 feet tall. Although it was lying there, it looked like a small mountain. The gold and silver light in Luo Fan's eyes flashed slightly. He had already seen all the changes in their bodies. After 6 years of training, as the consciousness of the world and the spirit of all living things, the spiritual consciousness that contained a mysterious great Tao had completely fused with this soul spirit. Furthermore, after being refined and fused with the mysterious essence of this spirit soul, it had become even more condensed than it had been 6 years ago. It appeared to be sparkling and translucent, as if it were the most perfect gem or jade in the world. As for the Sky Dragon Patriarch, his power had grown from his infancy to his current mature stage after 6 years of training. His power had reached the peak of the returning to being realm, and he was already quite powerful. Luo Fan looked at it and nodded in his heart. He took a step forward. His figure flashed dozens of times, and in the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at the mountain peak where they were resting. He did not hide his figure. The moment he stepped onto the mountain peak, he was noticed by the Sky Dragon Patriarch and Gu Ling. As soon as Gu Ling saw Luo Fan, he was overjoyed. He supported his exhausted body and stood up with great difficulty. He bowed and said, "Master, disciple has finally dealt with the heaven poison. Well done." Luo Fan nodded with a slight smile on his face. Hearing Luo Fan's light praise, Gu Ling did not feel that it was too light. Instead, she was extremely happy, and the smile on her face could no longer be suppressed. "Thank you for your guidance, Great Immortal. If not for Great Immortal, I would not have achieved what I have today." Only then did the Sky Dragon Patriarch kneel down and kowtow to Luo Fan. Although his body had matured and improved greatly in the past few years, it was only secondary. More importantly, through the cooperation with Gu Ling during this period of time, he had gradually comprehended the mysteries of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor's power and had a clearer understanding of the direction of his future cultivation. This is an opportunity that you seized. There is no need to thank anyone. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. An invisible force acted on the Sky Dragon Patriarch and lifted him up. The Sky Dragon Patriarch did not dare to resist. He stood up, but he did not dare to maintain his huge body facing Luo Fan. His body swayed slightly and gradually shrank. Soon, he had shrunk to 3 meters long. He looked no different from 6 years ago. However, his aura was more than 100 times stronger than 6 years ago. Even if he was lying there, no one would be able to see him as a small dragon. With a thought from Luo Fan, boundless golden light appeared out of nowhere and instantly enveloped Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch. Under the shroud of the golden light, Gu Ling and Old Ancestor Sky Dragon instantly felt an incomparably gentle and comfortable feeling from the inside out. In the blink of an eye, the exhaustion caused by the constant battles over the past 6 years had completely disappeared. His body, both inside and out, became incomparably comfortable. His condition had also instantly recovered to its peak state. The exhaustion from before seemed to have happened a long time ago. This feeling caused the man and dragon to feel slightly sluggish. When the two of them had recovered to their peak state, Luo Fan dispersed the golden light that was born from the void with a thought. During these 6 years, Gu Ling and Old Ancestor Sky Dragon had indeed been fighting non-stop with each other. Back then, Gu Ling had received a hint from Luo Fan's power and the fluctuation of the heaven poison. He had suddenly caught a clue about the spacetime door. After he discovered this clue, the life form of the poison of heaven, under the influence of some mysterious mechanism, also learned of this matter. In that instant, the living beings within began to charge forward, throwing all caution to the wind as they carried the firmament poison and formed all sorts of phenomena. Primordial divine beasts attacked Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon. The 10,000 bones of the heavenly way that Luo Fan had refined with the help of the spacetime door was naturally quite mysterious, and its power was quite terrifying. However, the power that it could display also depended on the activation of Gu Ling. After the living beings condensed the phenomena of the primordial divine beasts with the heaven poison, they suffered great losses, but their power also increased by thousands of times. In the end, the 10,000 bones heavenly Tao that Gu Ling controlled was unable to completely defend. It could only shrink its defenses and use various methods to defend against the phenomena and the attacks of the primordial divine beasts, resulting in an extremely intense battle. Just as Luo Fan had expected, the battle lasted for 3 years before it ended. After 3 years, the heaven poison could no longer condense any phenomena or primordial divine beasts that were powerful enough to break through the defenses of the 10,000 bones heavenly Tao. As a result, Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch were able to find the spacetime door. After finding the spacetime door, the Yellow Turban Heaven knew that something was amiss. It used the power of the world to pass through the spacetime door and condensed a sky screen that covered tens of thousands of miles under some mysterious law. It instantly changed spacetime and enveloped Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch within. The sky screen was mysterious. Due to the support of the entire Yellow Turban Heaven, it formed a world of its own. A world of yellow skies and black soil. There were countless soldiers and beasts facing Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch. Moreover, the laws in this world were extremely strange. The 10,000 bones heavenly Tao was completely useless under these laws. It could only protect the core souls of Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch so that they wouldn't die from the attacks of the countless soldiers and living beings. Under these circumstances, Gu Ling and Old Ancestor Tian Long could only rely on their own strength and bodies to fight against the endless soldiers and beasts. In the end, he spent 3,000 years to completely annihilate all the soldiers and beasts in this world. When the soldiers and beasts in this world were completely destroyed, the entire world instantly collapsed and turned into a gust of yellow gas. The 10,000 bones heavenly Tao instantly sucked it in and completely disappeared. After absorbing the yellow gas, the 10,000 bones heavenly Tao was naturally greatly strengthened. The surrounding world also returned to normal due to the disappearance of the yellow gas, returning to the primordial world. After that, Luo Fan arrived, the reason why he could stay in the yellow turban heaven and black soil world for 3,000 years and the primordial world for 3 years was very simple. It was because the yellow turban heaven and black soil world was, in fact, the endless living beings in the yellow turban heaven used the power of the world to open and expand the space-time door. Its true appearance was the space-time door. Therefore, the flow of time in the world was also affected by the flow of time in Yellow Gene Heaven. Although it was not as fast as Yellow Gene Heaven, which was billions of times faster than Primordial World, it was still thousands of times faster than Primordial World. The 3,000 years inside were equivalent to 3 years in the Primordial World. When Luo Fan controlled the Primordial World to produce the healing golden light, he instantly deduced the entire situation from the changes in their bodies, as if he had seen it with his own eyes. A trace of emotion flashed through his mind. The power of the world is indeed incredible. Just the weak living beings can distort the time of the primordial world by 1,000 times with the help of the power of the world. As he sighed, Luo Fan did not say anything else. He raised his hand and waved. A magic cloud the size of an acre suddenly appeared under his feet out of nowhere. Then, it lifted slightly and carried the two of them and a dragon into the sky at a seemingly slow but actually fast speed. The magic cloud was still emitting the sound of the great Tao. As the clouds surged on it, they were constantly evolving the infinite truths of the great Tao. However, Patriarch Sky Dragon was no longer as infatuated as he was when he saw the magic cloud last time. It was not that his pursuit of the Tao was no longer the same as it was 6 years ago, but after 3,000 years of fighting, he understood that what he needed to do now was to be down to earth, to strengthen his foundation, and not to bite off more than he could chew to comprehend the great Tao of heaven and earth that he could only reach after who knew how many tens of thousands of years. Luo Fan swept a glance at Patriarch Sky Dragon and was a little surprised by his decisiveness. If I had met this dragon earlier, he might have been my disciple and Gu Ling would have been my mount. A thought suddenly flashed across Luo Fan's mind. When this thought appeared, he couldn't help but have a deeper understanding of the word fate that existed in the unseen world. In the next 36 years, Luo Fan and the ancient spirit Heavenly Dragon Patriarch roamed the untainted land, dealing with the spacetime portals that connected to the untainted land caused by Gu Ling's probing. On this day, they had already dealt with the 11th spacetime portal. Only the last one, which was the portal closest to Buzhou Mountain, had not been dealt with yet. Over the past 36 years, Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon had not been able to relax or rest for a single moment. The 8 spacetime portals were located in an area spanning several trillion miles. If Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon were to travel alone, they might not even be able to traverse tens of thousands of years. However, for Luo Fan, it only took him a few days to complete the entire journey. Every time Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon exhausted their energy and endless power to deal with the spacetime portal, as well as the various strange life forms that came out of it, Luo Fan would casually summon a ray of golden light to relieve their fatigue. Afterwards, he would ride the magic cloud that contained the infinite truths of the great Tao and spend an extremely short amount of time to reach the next location, allowing the two to enter the battle once again. The 8 space-time portals represented 8 completely different primordial worlds. Since the primordial worlds were able to capture the tiny space-time rift that Gu Ling had created, the creator was naturally not simple. To Luo Fan, it was as easy as it had been before. However, to Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon, it was a problem that required them to exhaust all of their energy and go through untold hardships to finally resolve. Therefore, the location of each spacetime portal was a huge challenge for Gu Ling and Patriarch Sky Dragon, be it to their minds or their power. Fortunately, one of them was the consciousness of the world, the spirit of all living things, while the other was the #1 expert in the world for tens of thousands of years. Both of them had astonishing talent and great potential. Furthermore, with the occasional pointers from Luo Fan, Not only did they deal with the 8 spacetime portals, they also received great training in the process. Their bodies, power, and spirits all received great training, allowing them to improve greatly. Gu Ling had already made up his mind. He would no longer search for a physical body. Instead, he would wholeheartedly cultivate this soul. In the future, he would ask his master to teach him a method to refine the myriad bones heavenly Tao into his own body. Because of this, the degree of condensation of his soul increased by another level. At this moment, it had already arrived at a realm that was equivalent to the peak of the adversity realm. Although Patriarch Sky Dragon did not have the luck that Gu Ling had obtained from Luo Fan, his talent was still astonishing. Moreover, he had already comprehended the mysteries of the world that Gu Ling could not, so his speed of improvement was not slow at all. He had also reached the peak of the crossing disaster stage. When they reached the peak of the crossing disaster stage, no matter if it was Gu Ling or Patriarch Sky Dragon, they had already passed the stage where they could improve quickly. The crossing disaster stage was only a stage that was separated from the reversion technique like the origin sculpting soul technique created by Luo Fan. It referred to the stage before attaining the earthly immortal fruit of the way. This stage was rather mysterious. If one cultivated a suitable technique, then it would naturally cause a number of tribulations to be born in the world. If one survived this tribulation, then one would be able to comprehend the Grand Tao, attain the Tao fruit, attain the origin soul, or even seek the immortal body. If one couldn't survive this tribulation, then everything would be fleeting. Although Gu Ling had the art of soul validation and could trigger this tribulation at the right time, he would need to cultivate the art of soul validation to an extremely high level before he could trigger it. The technique created by Luo Fan was extremely mysterious. It contained the truth of the world and the supreme Grand Tao. If one wanted to cultivate this technique to an extremely profound stage, then it would naturally require a long period of time. It wasn't something that could be achieved in a short period of time. Thus, it was absolutely impossible for Gu Ling to break through in a short period of time. But Patriarch Sky Dragon was different. Even though he had comprehended the bottleneck of the independent immortal realm and the true immortal realm, and he could easily break through the crossing disaster stage in terms of cultivation, his body was still condensed from the outerium. It was innately incompatible with the primordial world, so the Grand Tao of the unseen world would naturally not send down a tribulation to help him cultivate. He had to wait for his body to be tempered by boundless innate origin energy and be contaminated by the aura of the primordial world. Then, as he comprehended the Grand Tao of the primordial world, he would gradually fuse with the primordial world. In the end, he would no longer be any different from the living beings of the primordial world. At that time, he would be able to trigger the Grand Tao of the unseen world to send down a tribulation to help him cultivate. Obviously, that would require a long period of time. As a result, when Gu Ling and old ancestor Tian Long reached the peak of the crossing disaster realm, their cultivation bases could not be improved in a short period of time. Luo Fan's cultivation was so high that he could easily grasp the state of the two of them. He knew that there was no need to train the two of them anymore, so he smiled and said to Gu Ling, who was bathed in the golden light, "The last spacetime door was not affected by you, so there is no need for the two of you to deal with it." Really? Gu Ling was slightly stunned when he heard that, and then he was overjoyed. Even though he had improved extremely quickly in this period of time, he was also exhausted and extremely fortunate. His mind was tense at almost every moment, and he could not relax for even a moment. Now that he heard that such days were about to end, he was naturally overjoyed, and even felt a sense of disbelief. "Of course it's true." Luo Fan smiled and said, "I have a treasure on Buzhou Mountain. I want to personally deal with the last spacetime door. You go find my treasure, and I will make arrangements when the time comes." "Yes, master. I just don't know where Buzhou Mountain is, what's so special about it, and where is your treasure?" Gu Ling's eyes lit up. Just like how a child would want to leave their parents and live a free life, even though Gu Ling respected Luo Fan a lot, he still wanted to live by himself without anyone to control him. Luo Fan shook his head, but he did not care. Mount Buzhou is 1.3 trillion miles away from the west-northwest of this place. This is the route of advance. I hope that you can arrive there within 1,500 years, Luo Fan said with a faint smile. Then, he raised his hand and pointed. A spiritual light that contained an infinite pattern rushed into the mud pellet between Gu Ling's eyebrows, and in the blink of an eye, it became his memory. 100,000. 300 billion miles. 1,500 years. At this time, Gu Ling had already fallen into a daze. Chapter 312. The Three Life-Saving Abilities. Idiot refining the location where Luo Fan and the ancient spirit Heavenly Dragon Patriarch were at was the second spatial door that had appeared in the primordial world in the past 10,000 years. They were 329,729 kilometers away from the first spatial door. In comparison, they were 1.03 trillion kilometers south-southwest of Buzhou Mountain. Even with the great improvement of Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch, it would still take them thousands of years to cross such a long distance, and this was on the basis that the two of them were constantly on the road. If they stopped along the way, they would occasionally have to deal with some unnecessary trouble, rest, and cultivate. This time would probably increase by more than 10 times, and obviously, in another few thousand years, it would be the time that Luo Fan had calculated. When the great calamity of the primordial world arrived, there would not be 10 times the time for the man and dragon to walk slowly. It was precisely because of this that Luo Fan had set such a seemingly unreasonable time limit. To Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch, it was only at this moment that they truly felt the vastness of the primordial world. In the past, although the world they were in was also quite vast, with their ability at that time, even if it took them a year or two, they would definitely be able to walk back and forth from the two poles of the world. Even after they came to the primordial world, in the past few decades, although they had moved within a range of trillions of kilometers and crossed a distance that was many times greater than 10 trillion kilometers, they were sitting on Luo Fan's auspicious cloud. Even if they traveled the furthest distance, it would only take them a few days to travel. Naturally, they did not feel much about the distance. At this moment, when they heard that they would have to walk for 1,500 years, which was a distance of 10 trillion kilometers, they truly felt the boundless vastness of the primordial world. Master, how can 1,500 years be enough for this 1.03 trillion kilometers? After a while, Gu Ling said anxiously, "You have to think of a way yourself. According to my calculations, if you can make some progress in the Soul Spirit Tao validation technique, you will definitely be able to reach Buzhou Mountain within 1,500 years. Don't disappoint me," Luo Fan said with a smile. Gu Ling was tongue-tied and did not know what to say. Although the Sky Dragon Patriarch did not dare to speak, he was eager to try. To him, being able to walk in such a vast world was something that he could not wish for. Compared to the great yellow dragon Emperor Heaven that he was already extremely familiar with, there was a new and unfamiliar place waiting for him to explore. This made his burning desire to seek Tao jump. Go. Although there are countless dangers in the primordial world, there are also countless treasures and opportunities there. Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Emperor, and Emperor Tian, and the Thousand Saints. Go. Although there are countless dangers in the great desolate land, there are also countless treasures and countless opportunities. If you pay attention to it wholeheartedly and don't slack off, you will definitely obtain great benefits, Luo Fan said lightly. His voice was calm and gentle, but it sounded as if it was right beside Gu Ling and old ancestor Sky Dragon's ears, drilling straight into their ears. Gu Ling and old ancestor Tian Long had a bitter look on their faces, while Gu Ling had an expectant look on his face. They slowly floated in the air, but in the blink of an eye, they had already landed on a mountain below. Although Luo Fan seemed to have only gently pushed him and the dragon down from the auspicious clouds, it seemed as if they were under the auspicious clouds when they landed on the ground. But obviously that was not the case. When he sent them down the auspicious cloud, his mind moved slightly. He directly distorted the space of the untainted land and sent them to a mountain peak that contained a small stream of primordial chi thousands of miles away. There are 3 of my magic powers here. They contain the ability to save your lives 3 times. You can keep them well. When Luo Fan saw them land on the mountain peak, they were all at a loss. After all, he couldn't bear to see them like this. He raised his hand and a spirit light containing several levels rushed out from his finger. It carried his will across a distance of millions of miles and went straight into the Naiwan between Gu Ling's eyebrows, fusing with it. 3 mysterious and indescribable halos of light flashed behind Gu Ling's head, and a powerful aura was released within 100 feet of his body. However, it was enough to make Patriarch Sky Dragon, who was at the side, feel extremely pressured both physically and mentally. The voice that Luo Fan spoke also flashed in Guling's mind. Hearing this, Guling was both happy and worried. He knew that this trip would be very dangerous. He could only kneel in the direction of the spiritual light and kowtow 3 times. He said, "Thank you, Master. Guling will not disappoint Master. I will not embarrass Master." Luo Fan smiled and waved his hand. The auspicious cloud under his feet floated slowly but actually quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had disappeared without a trace. Guling knelt for a long time without any response. He sighed and stood up. He said to Old Ancestor Sky Dragon, "This is definitely not where the space-time portal is. Let me see where this place is and then decide what to do." Old Ancestor Sky Dragon nodded and said, "That's right. I will listen to Master's orders." Guling nodded and closed his eyes. He began to check the map that Luo Fan had sent to his mind. Not long after, he opened his eyes and said, "I already know where this place is. Mount Buzhou is in the northwest and slightly to the west. There is a large river of black water about 100,000 li ahead. It is 8,000 li wide and emits a black fog that can obstruct flight. You have to wade through the water and refine a few treasures here in order to cross." Old Ancestor Sky Dragon did not say much and just nodded. To him, there was not much difference. To be able to see the mysterious scenery of the untainted land, to be able to fly and run freely, and to pursue the supreme great Tao was the greatest joy to him. Seeing Old Ancestor Sky Dragon like this, Guling knew that it would be a waste of time to discuss with him. He could only shake his head and look around. After sensing carefully, he found a cave halfway up the mountain. He turned into an escape light and landed outside the cave in the blink of an eye. In the cave, there were strands of chaotic chi coming out. It was where the small chaotic chi source was. Is this the chaotic chi? It really contains great power. According to the soul testimony method technique, if I use this chaotic chi to purify my power will increase by 100 times in the future. Now that I have time, I should try to absorb a strand of it. Guling thought to himself as he raised his hand and grabbed a strand of chaotic chi. Although he had already cultivated his cultivation realm and the energy in his body to the peak of the crossing disaster stage, because his understanding of the soul proving Tao technique was very shallow, he did not use this technique to convert his own energy. In addition, Luo Fan did not specially find a source of primal chaos origin energy to purify his energy. Therefore, even though he had such power, it was the first time he had seen primal chaos origin energy. It was also his first time using this chaotic chi to cultivate. Although Old Ancestor Sky Dragon was a step slower than Guling, he had already landed in front of the cave. After landing, Old Ancestor Sky Dragon instantly sensed the strands of chaotic chi in the void. He was shocked and almost could not stand steadily. He cried out, What kind of qi is this? It seems to be similar to the qi when the world was first formed, before the chaos yuan was broken, and before the clear and turbid yuan was separated. It seems to contain all the mysteries of qi. This is the chaotic qi. It is the unique qi of the untainted world. If we wait for a few 100 million years, I'm afraid there will not be a trace of such qi left in the world. After all, Guling had Luo Fan's inheritance. Although Luo Fan did not explain too much to him, the soul testimony method technique was all-encompassing. He naturally knew such common knowledge, and was much luckier than Old Ancestor Sky Dragon. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon stared blankly at the void, as if he wanted to see the magical qi that contained the attribute of chaos and could be converted into all kinds of qi. Guling also knew that Old Ancestor Sky Dragon was shocked. He did not care about it and stepped into the cave first. This was where the source of chaotic qi was. Although it was extremely small, it was still extremely powerful for Guling, who had never come into contact with such qi. The deeper he went, the more Guling felt that his body was under greater and greater pressure. It was as if there was an extremely powerful corrosive force that wanted to transform his body and his soul into some strange and mysterious existence. Guling knew that this was the innate ability of the chaotic qi, so he was not surprised. With a thought, he had already activated the soul testimony method technique. The mysterious and unfathomable mantra flowed through his mind. The power in his body began to circulate in a path that seemed to contain all the mysteries of the world. With the circulation of the mantra and the circulation route, the powerful corrosive force instantly changed. However, it was no longer able to affect him in the slightest. Instead, it surged into his body in strands and gradually intertwined with his power, causing his power to undergo a slight change that was almost undetectable. Seeing this, Guling was overjoyed. He sped up. Not long after, he arrived at the depths of the cave, where the source of chaotic qi was. This source of chaotic qi was in the shape of a pool. It was 10 meters wide, and the mist was tumbling. The wisps of chaotic qi were evaporating from the pool, making it look like a sauna. When Guling arrived, he felt that the chaotic qi that surged into his body was increasing. He was very satisfied. It was a pity that his soul had not been tempered by the chaotic qi, so his tolerance for the chaotic qi was rather limited. After getting within 10 meters of the source of chaotic qi, he could not get any closer. He felt that if he got any closer, the chaotic qi that surged in from the surroundings would destroy his body, causing him to lose control of the power in his body. After testing it out, Guling could only sit down 10 meters away and calmly cultivate the soul testimony method technique. He tried his best to absorb the chaotic qi into his body and promote the transformation of his power. The soul testimony method technique was extremely profound. It contained the mysteries of the Supreme Great Tao. It was clearly not easy to cultivate it and completely transform this power. At this moment, Old Ancestor Sky Dragon had already stepped into the valley. However, he did not have a mysterious method like the soul testimony method technique, so he could only stop 100 meters away. If he took another step, his body would be corroded by the chaotic qi and lose his ability to control himself. In the end, he might even turn into a stone statue. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon stood there and tried his best for a long time. He realized that he could not take another step forward. He could only look at Guling with an envious gaze. At the same time, he sighed in his mind, "It's so good to have a master." After sighing, he could only sit down cross-legged and use his own method to try and absorb the chaotic qi. He hoped that he could borrow the mysterious power of the chaotic qi to change the nature of his body and increase the purity of his power. This method also unintentionally coincided with the Tao of heaven and earth. Unknowingly, the foreign attribute of his body was removed and he gradually merged with the great wasteland world. If his body was completely compatible with the chaotic chi and the nature of his power was completely transformed, his body would naturally be accepted by the heavenly Tao of the great wasteland world. Naturally, heavenly tribulation would descend and help him achieve the Tao. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. On this day, Guling opened his eyes helplessly. He sighed and stood up. Through these 10 days of cultivation, the amount of chaotic chi he absorbed was extremely small. It was only equivalent to less than 100,000th of the power in his body. However, this little bit of chaotic yuan chi was already the limit of what his body could endure. At this time, his body was full. He felt that if he absorbed a little bit of chaotic chi, his body would explode like a balloon. No matter how he activated the Soul Spirit Proving the Way mantra, he could not absorb the chaotic chi that could be controlled outside into his body. He could not integrate it into his body and into his power. Although the Soul Spirit Proving the Way mantra was mysterious and profound, it was also affected by Guling's aptitude. Although this Soul Spirit body was mysterious and incredible, it was created by Luo Fan. It was not born, and there was an essential difference between it and the innate body of the innate God. If it was not for the infinite mysteries of Guling's divine soul and spiritual consciousness, Guling would not be able to compare with the innate God unless he cultivated the antecedental technique. However, even with the support of this mysterious consciousness, the difference in their aptitude still made Guling unable to absorb the chaotic chi without any worries. Guling stood up and walked forward against the chaotic chi. He directly passed through the thick barrier of chaotic chi and arrived at the edge of the pond. His body could no longer absorb the chaotic chi, so the external chaotic chi naturally could no longer enter his body. As a result, the surrounding chaotic chi could no longer affect him. He also did not need to worry about the chaotic chi causing harm to his body. When he arrived at the edge of the chaotic chi, Guling's eyes flashed. There were 2 profound and complicated 3-dimensional talismans that seemed to contain the mysteries of heaven and earth flashing in his eyes. Then, he rushed forward and directly into the chaotic chi pond in front of him. As the 2 3-dimensional talismans entered the pond, the surging chaotic chi in the pond suddenly changed. It was like a swimming pool that had its plug pulled out. Suddenly, an increasingly obvious and large whirlpool appeared. As the turbid waves surged, the chaotic energy emitted from the pond gradually disappeared. The disappearance of the chaotic chi woke up old ancestor Tianlong, who was doing his best to absorb the chaotic chi 1,000 feet away. In the past 10 days, the chaotic chi that old ancestor Tianlong had absorbed was tens of thousands of times less than what Guling had absorbed. At this moment, there were only traces of chaotic chi that were almost imperceptible. It was like a wisp of chaotic chi that was shuttling through his meridians. It was a world of difference from Guling's power, which had its nature slightly changed. This was the difference between having a cultivation method and not having a cultivation method. Old ancestor Tianlong opened his eyes and saw Guling standing 1,000 feet away with his hands behind his back. His eyes shone with a hint of chaotic chi as he rushed into the chaotic chi pond in front of him. As the 2 spiritual lights rushed in, the chaotic chi pond seemed to be stirred by a huge wooden stick and began to churn violently. A huge whirlpool was formed. At the same time, a powerful suction force was produced, causing a breeze to flow into the whirlpool from all directions. The lack of chaotic chi in the surroundings was due to this suction force. It's so good to have a master. Old ancestor Tianlong didn't know how many times he had sighed. At this moment, the chaotic chi that filled the cave had completely disappeared, but he still didn't dare to go up to the side of the chaotic chi pond to observe the changes in the chaotic chi. It had to be known that the chaotic origin energy pond contained an enormous amount of chaotic origin energy. Even a slight splash would be enough to heavily injure old ancestor Tianlong. He would not be able to withstand the impact of the chaotic origin energy, and all his years of cultivation would be for naught. Even though he wholeheartedly pursued the Tao and was willing to abandon his supreme status and practically boundless power for the sake of advancing a step further, it didn't mean that he was rash. He naturally wouldn't take such an unnecessary risk. Not only that, he also quietly retreated out of the cave and waited outside for Gu Ling to refine his treasure. He was worried that Gu Ling wouldn't be able to control it and the whirlpool would explode. At that time, endless chaotic qi would surge out. If he was still inside, he wouldn't even have a place to run. At this moment, Gu Ling didn't know what old ancestor Tian Long was thinking. At this moment, he was relying on a method of artifact refinement in the soul embodiment Tao technique. He was going to absorb the chaotic energy in the pond before him, condense it, and refine it into an artifact that could allow him to easily cross the 8,000-li Black River. The two three-dimensional talismans contained countless refinement method. It was a foolproof refinement method. It was specially created by Luo Fan for disciples like Gu Ling, who didn't have much understanding of the Tao of artifact refining, but needed to use the Tao of artifact refining. After the two three-dimensional talismans condensed, they could automatically absorb origin qi, absorb materials, refine materials, construct formations, construct talismans, and condense restrictions. As long as a sliver of thought was attached to it, the talismans would occasionally choose the required form and function, and the two three-dimensional talismans would naturally refine the magic treasure. Chapter 313. 9-story fortress ship, endless extinction. After 3 days, an endless amount of light shot out from the chaotic energy pond in the cave. This light was endless, and it covered the entire cave, making it so that no one could see anything. Even if they opened their eyes, it would be as if they were blind. Gu Ling didn't care about this phenomenon at all. Instead, a look of joy appeared on her face. The 2 rays of light that shot out of her eyes suddenly withdrew. She raised her hand and the endless, blinding rays of light instantly disappeared. Then, an item shot out from the pool of chaotic yuan qi that had already mostly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, it landed in his hand. It was an artifact that looked like a 9-story fortress ship. It was only 3 inches long and looked as if it was carved from a large walnut. However, it was beautiful and incomparably light. After the small fortress ship landed in Gu Ling's hand, the smile on Gu Ling's face became even wider. The artifact refinement method that Master taught me is truly profound. I didn't think that with just a few thoughts and a bit of control, I would be able to refine such a wondrous artifact that can fly in the sky and travel through the earth, as well as traverse mountains and seas. Such thoughts flashed through Gu Ling's mind. It's a pity that although this magic tool has great power and a boundless future, it only has one restriction. If I want to truly display its potential and raise its power to its peak, I will need to spend a large amount of time to refine it. If I can complete the refinement of all 36 restrictions, how great would that be? Gu Ling thought to himself with a greedy mind. Although Luo Fan's fool's refining method was mysterious, easy to operate, and did not consume any energy, it also had a weakness, and that was that the magic tools refined using this method would, at most, have one layer of restriction. Even if the restriction was simple and the materials used were precious, it was still the same. If he wanted to improve the might of this magic treasure, increase its restrictions, or even make it a magic treasure, then he would need to expend an extremely huge amount of time, energy, and strength to refine it, and there was no shortcut that could be taken. After sighing with dissatisfaction, Gu Ling put the walnut-sized fortress ship into his body. He didn't look at the chaotic origin qi pond anymore and turned to leave the cave. When he arrived at the entrance of the cave, he saw old ancestor Tian Long looking at him expectantly. Knowing what old ancestor Tian Long was feeling, Gu Ling felt a little proud and couldn't help but smile. I used the method that Master taught me to refine an artifact. Although it only has one restriction, it's enough for me to use. Old ancestor Tian Long couldn't help but look forward to it even more. I hope Master can let me see it. Guling chuckled as she raised her hand and pointed. The walnut-sized 9-story ship suddenly moved and shot out of her hand. It grew in the blink of an eye to a length of 1,000 feet and a height of 100 feet. This 9-storied ship was an extremely rare means of transportation that Gu Ling had found from the wills of the billions of worlds in the universe. The entire ship was richly ornamented, and its design was extremely exquisite while its structure was extremely intricate. As it stood towering in space, it naturally emanated a steady and unfettered aura that was immovable like a mountain. It was like a vessel that could break through all mist and traverse space at will. Looking at this magic weapon, Old Ancestor Sky Dragon fell into a state of shock. Seeing Old Ancestor Tianlong's expression, Gu Ling felt quite proud and said, "How is it? This ship is designed by me with the help of the Heaven's Ship of the 7 Orifices and 100 Possibilities. It can fly in the sky, travel through the earth, cross mountains and seas, stretch the void, expand the space, and protect the body. Although the space of the untainted world is stable and this ship can't expand the void inside it, it is still extraordinary. To actually use such a mysterious chaotic chi to compress and convert it into such an ordinary material. What a waste, what a waste!" Old Ancestor Sky Dragon murmured, but Gu Ling's subsequent praise was stuck in his throat, making him feel rather depressed. Although this ship was directly constructed with the help of Primal Chaos Yuan Qi, the nature of the Primal Chaos Yuan Qi had been changed by Luo Fan's artifact forging technique. It had changed from a gaseous state to a solid state, and it had been changed by that divine ability into all kinds of wonderful materials such as steel wood, heavenly crystal, and strange stones. Although these materials were also quite strange and had their own magical uses, and all kinds of characteristics that the chaotic chi did not have, in the eyes of Old Ancestor Sky Dragon, who was in terms of power, their value was not even 1% of a strand of chaotic chi. "You forget it, follow me onto the boat. We have already wasted 13 days. If we do not move now, I'm afraid that we will not be able to rush to Mount Buzhou within 1,500 years to see Master's avatar." Gu Ling was rather displeased as she said. With that, he ignored Old Ancestor Sky Dragon and took a step forward. He had already stepped onto the highest floor of the ship, where the control room was. Old Ancestor Sky Dragon shook his head and looked at the ship with a pained expression. He flapped his wings and stepped onto the ship as well. The highest floor of the 9th floor was the control room of the ship. It was not very big, but it was at least twice as big as it looked from the outside. Gu Ling sat in front of the control panel of the ship. He sat cross-legged on the platform and let out his will to connect with the crystal-like core of the ship. In an instant, he felt like he had become the ship. His body became stronger and more stable, and he felt like a fish in water in this space. A thought flashed through his mind, and the ship suddenly shot forward. In the blink of an eye, they had already crossed several hundred miles. Although this speed was far less than a millionth of Luo Fan's magic cloud, it was still more than twice as fast as Gu Ling's own flying speed. Good. This is only one restriction. If I can refine all 36 restrictions to perfection, wouldn't my speed increase by 10,000 times in the future? At that time, reaching Buzhou Mountain within 1,500 years wouldn't be a dream. Gu Ling felt this speed slightly and was overjoyed. After a while, Gu Ling's family arrived at the Black River on the 9-story ship. Although the Black River was only 8,000 miles long, it stretched for a long time. It was like a scar that split the earth apart. It extended from an unknown distance and flowed downstream for an unknown distance. Black mist rose from it. Even though the black mist became thinner the higher one went, it still existed even at 90,000 kilometers in the sky, affecting all living beings. If it was a living being that had not achieved Tao, it would not be able to form a body of its own. It would be greatly affected by the external environment, and it would not be able to fly in the black fog. The only way to cross the river was to use a ship that contained a mysterious power, or to use one's own body to wade through the water. Furthermore, the black water contained some sort of extreme and extreme cold energy. It wasn't something that an ordinary living being could endure. For living beings like Gu Ling and the Sky Dragon Patriarch, no matter how powerful they would be affected by the black water and damage their foundations. It was precisely because of this description in Luo Fan's map that Gu Ling knew the peculiarity of this black water and did not dare to casually wade through it. Arriving at the Black Water River, Gu Ling's mind moved slightly, and the scene of the outside world appeared in the void in front of him, down to the finest detail. Seeing this, old ancestor Tian Long couldn't help but exclaim. In front of him was a boundless black river that was as wide as the ocean. It flowed from an unknown distance upstream to an unknown distance downstream. The river was turbulent, and the turbid waves were monstrous. Black smoke rose, as if the entire river was boiling. There was not a single trace of foreign matter on the entire river. Even if there was dust floating on it, it would instantly fall and sink to the bottom of the river after being swept away by the rapid flow of the river. Seeing such a dangerous river, old ancestor Tian Long felt that it was troublesome and exciting at the same time. Gu Ling moved his mind, and the 9-story ship suddenly fell into the Black River below. Although the 9-storied ship could fly on the Black Water River, the energy consumption was thousands of times greater than that of other places, and it was far less economical and practical than walking on the surface of the river. The refinement method of the 9-story fortress ship was quite mysterious, and it even used chaotic yuan qi as its main material. After it was formed, it had an indescribable protective power. It couldn't be said that it was invulnerable, but it was enough to defend against the and cold energy emitted by the Black Water River. The power of the Black River was quite mysterious, and the 9-story ship could defend against it at any time. However, there was also a chill that penetrated the defense and invaded the core of the ship, causing the space that was 2 times larger than the outside world to become much cooler. I still need this ship. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will take several months to cross this river. Gu Ling was quite satisfied. The ship traveled very steadily in the turbulent Black River. Although its speed couldn't be compared to flying, it was still quite fast. In less than half a day, the 9-story ship had reached the center of the Black River. There was no danger along the way, which almost made Gu Ling slack off. Just as Gu Ling arrived at the center of the river, a powerful force suddenly shot up from the bottom of the river and headed straight for the 9-storied ship. Suddenly, there was a flash of green light on the 9-story ship, and it resisted the powerful force. At this moment, Gu Ling's consciousness was fused with the 9-storied ship. With a thought, he discovered what kind of force was blasting towards him from the bottom of the ship. It was a huge, strange fish that was tens of thousands of meters long, and its eyes flashed with red light. The strange fish had a huge mouth and fangs, and its whole body was covered with black bone spurs. Its whole body was engraved with mysterious talisman patterns that seemed to contain some kind of the laws of heaven and earth. It was extremely ugly and sinister. When the strange fish saw that its charge was unable to shatter the tiny foreign object above it, a trace of doubt flashed across its glowing red eyes. Then, with a shake of his body, a bone spur shot out from his back like a cannonball. In the blink of an eye, it had crossed a distance of several thousand feet and was heading straight for the 9-storied ship. Gu Ling used the body of the ship to sense the flow of the water. He instantly knew that the power contained in the bone spike was secondary and couldn't break through the ship's defenses. However, the extreme and cold energy contained within the bone spike was incomparably powerful. It wasn't something that he could resist. With a thought, the 9-story ship shone brightly, and then it suddenly turned around and rushed out of the water, floating hundreds of kilometers in the air. The bone spike pierced through thin air and soared into the sky. It made a circle in the air for dozens of kilometers before rushing back and returning to the back of the strange fish. It was as if it had never been shot out in the first place. This is the annihilation sky fish. It's a creature from the endless annihilation sky. How could there be such a fish in the untainted land? Old ancestor sky dragon cried out in surprise. Annihilation sky fish? This is the annihilation heavenly fish? Hearing old ancestor sky dragon's words, Guling couldn't help but be astonished and repeated a few times. Yes, this is the legendary annihilation sky fish. It lives in the endless poison sea and only knows destruction, not creation. It is the most dangerous existence among the annihilation sky fish. I heard of the existence of this kind of fish from a traveler in the heavens. It is said that as long as one annihilation sky fish appears in any world, that world will gradually turn into the endless annihilation sky, which is irresistible and irreversible. However, why is there only one annihilation sky fish? According to its reproduction speed, it only needs 1 year to produce billions of offspring. Old ancestor sky dragon said. A traveler in the heavens was a kind of life form that cultivated a special cultivation method or was born with a strange power. They could travel between the billions of worlds in the heavens at will. This kind of life form was knowledgeable because they traveled through the heavens. Under normal circumstances, they knew about the billions of worlds in the heavens. The so-called Forbidden World ranking was made by these travelers. Gu Ling had also heard of these travelers and knew that old ancestor Sky Dragon was not lying. Although these travelers are unable to step into the untainted land, and there are very few of them, they are experienced and knowledgeable. What they said should not be false. However, why would such a strange thing happen? This is really puzzling. Gu Ling said doubtfully. Ugh! The annihilation sky shark suddenly roared and opened its mouth. A stream of water that was darker, thicker, and heavier than the other black water sprayed out from its mouth. In an instant, it crossed the distance of 100 miles and rushed directly to the bottom of the 9-story fortress ship. Looking at the speed of the water, it was even faster than the 9-story fortress ship. In the blink of an eye, it had already hit the ship. A loud rumble resounded. Gu Ling and old ancestor Sky Dragon felt the entire void tremble. The void of the core control room was slightly chaotic. The entire void expanded and shrunk, almost causing Gu Ling and old ancestor Sky Dragon to vomit blood. After all, this 9-story fortress ship was only a magic item with a layer of restrictions. Although it had endless uses and its power would be limitless if it was refined in the future, due to the restrictions, it could not display much of its power. When it was hit by the black water that contained endless evil thoughts, it actually felt like it could not bear it. How dare you destroy my magic item? Gu Ling's thoughts fused with the 9-story fortress ship. When the 9-story fortress ship was hit, he felt his mind tremble violently. There was even a slight pain flowing through his mind. He knew that this was a sign that the magic item was slightly damaged. He could not help but be furious. With a thought, the great Tao of myriad bones floated from the top of his head. Then, it rushed out of the 9-story fortress ship and floated in the void, emitting a dazzling light and showing endless power. Ugh! The annihilation sky shark did not know what was going on. It roared again and spat out 2 streams of black water. This time, it passed through 2 of the toughest and most powerful bone spikes on its head and blasted towards the fortress ship and the great Tao of myriad bones. You're courting death! Gu Ling roared angrily. With a thought, the dazzling light released by the great Tao of myriad bones suddenly shrank and condensed, turning into 2 huge hands that were thousands of feet wide. With a grab, it caught the 2 streams of black water. With a slight force, it crushed the black water and grabbed the bone spikes within. Gu Ling's mastery of the myriad bones' heavenly Tao had already reached the acme of perfection after breaking through the 8 space-time doors in a row, reaching the acme of perfection. With such condensed form, it was normal for him to use the great Tao of myriad bones, and it did not seem the slightest bit strenuous. For some reason, the monstrous fish appeared to be a little foolish and brutal, but it wasn't completely stupid. When it saw how easily the myriad bones' heavenly Tao had destroyed its attack, it knew that it wasn't a match for the creature above it, even though it still had countless attacks it could use. It turned around and swung its tail. It didn't even bother to use the bone spikes it had shot out, and its body charged straight down. In just a short while, it had already charged over 500 kilometers deep into the river. Want to run? How can I let you off so easily for harming my magic tool? With the help of the great Tao of myriad bones, Gu Ling saw the scene below clearly and shouted. With a thought, the great Tao of myriad bones withdrew the light along with the 2 bone spikes, then suddenly sank. In the blink of an eye, it had already crossed thousands of miles and arrived at the depths of the Black River. It caught up to the Annihilation Sky Shark that was fleeing in panic like a stray dog. Seeing that the great Tao of myriad bones had caught up to it, the Annihilation Sky Shark finally knew that it could not escape. With a roar, it turned around and spat out a round fusion pill, which blasted towards the great Tao of myriad bones like a cannonball. This round fusion pill contained boundless power. After spitting out this pill, the Annihilation Sky Shark's color became a little dim. It was obvious that it had consumed too much energy. However, even so, the Annihilation Sky Shark still did not give up. It turned around again and twisted its body again, sinking another 1,000 miles. Gu Ling and the great Tao of myriad bones fused together. When this pill was spat out, with the help of his decades of battle intuition, he knew that if this pill exploded, the power would probably be quite great. He hurriedly controlled the great Tao of myriad bones to emit a ray of light that enveloped this pill. Then, he drew the pill back into the great Tao of myriad bones. In an instant, his power changed, transforming it into pure and condensed power, allowing the great Tao of myriad bones to advance a little.